I remember the moment with brutal clarity, as if it's frozen in time. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly while I stood by the office coffee machine, pouring oat milk into my cup. It was an ordinary morning, until Ryan walked in. The new CEO. The founder's son. The man who carried his last name like a crown he hadn't earned. He didn't say hello. Didn't nod. His eyes landed on me with the cold detachment of someone staring at a stain on the carpet.
Lily.
My office.
Now.
The words cracked through the air. Sharp, final. Not a request. A command. For a second, I just stood there gripping my coffee cup, the steam curling between us. I'd given this company 11 years of my life. I built the client services department from scratch, trained the very people who sat outside his office, closed over 100 contracts that kept the lights on. But to him, I wasn't worth a single smile. I was disposable. I followed him down the hall, my chest tight, my palms damp. He didn't even sit when he delivered the blow. You're fired. His voice was flat, mechanical, like he was reciting the weather report. We don't need lazy people like you dragging this place down. For a heartbeat, I thought he was joking. My lips parted, searching for words. Excuse me? He didn't even look at me. He flipped through a pile of papers like he was deciding what sandwich to order. You heard me. Pack your things.
Leave.
Effective immediately. The floor tilted beneath me. My heart hammered in my ears. Every instinct screamed to fight back, to demand an explanation, to remind him who kept this company alive while he was still deciding which Ivy League tie to wear. But instead, I smiled.
Calm.
Polite. Deliberate. Understood. Have a nice day, Ryan. I walked out with my head held high, but inside, I was shaking. The room blurred as my teammates looked up from their desks, their eyes wide. Some started to stand, questions on their lips, but I gave a quick shake of my head. Don't make this harder. Packing my desk felt like erasing 11 years of my life. The photos, the notebooks filled with late-night scribbles, the contracts I'd bled over. I carried the box in silence. On the drive home, my mind played back every sacrifice, missed holidays, nights spent glued to my laptop while my marriage crumbled. I had given everything, and in return, I was tossed aside like nothing. But anger wasn't what I felt. Not yet. What burned in me was confusion.
Why?
Why now? That question gnawed at me all night. Sleep never came. I lay awake replaying Ryan's face, the arrogance in his voice. Something about the timing was wrong. Too careless. Too reckless. I had spent 6 months securing the Kingswell deal, the biggest contract in years. The final meeting was set for Friday. I was the one who knew every detail. And now I was gone. Did he even know what he'd done? The next morning, just after 9, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. For a moment, I let it ring. I didn't think I could take another hit. But curiosity won. Lily, it's Mr. Cole. My breath caught. The real CEO. The man who had hired me after one interview, 11 years ago. His voice was tight, coiled with barely contained fury. Why the hell did you leave? What happened? I hesitated, my throat dry. Your son fired me. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. What? Yesterday. He said I was lazy. That I wasn't needed anymore. There was a pause, long and heavy. Then, slowly, like he was trying not to explode. Lily, did he even read your contract? I frowned. What do you mean? He's finalizing the Kingswell deal today, isn't he?
Yes.
We were scheduled to meet them at 11. I heard rustling papers, then a loud thud, like he'd slammed his fist on the desk. Jesus Christ. Lily, your contract has a clause. One I added after the last acquisition fiasco. You're not just the account manager, you're the only authorized negotiator for Kingswell. Without you, that deal doesn't close. Not legally. Not ethically. Not practically. I froze. The realization hit like a slow, burning flame. Ryan hadn't read it. He had no idea. He'd pulled the trigger, and now the gun was pointed straight at himself. When Mr. Cole hung up, the silence that followed was deafening. I sat there in my apartment, coffee untouched, staring at nothing. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. 11 years, and this was how it ended. Fired by a spoiled man-boy who treated business like a video game. But unlike a game, there were no do-overs here. This time, the consequences would be real. Part of me wanted to show up at the office, to watch the empire crack under the weight of his arrogance. Another part, the one that had endured thankless overtime, the one that had swallowed pride until there was none left, wanted to let it burn. At 10:13, the first call came. Ryan. I let it go to voicemail, then reception, then legal, then accounting. My phone lit up again and again, buzzing in my hand like a hornet nest ready to explode. I didn't answer a single one. I just watched as the screen filled with missed calls. Voicemails stacked up, blinking at me, relentless. And for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected. Power. The voicemail blinked on my phone. Against my better judgment, I tapped it open. Lily, hi, it's Ryan. His voice cracked under pressure. Listen, yesterday was a misunderstanding. I might have acted too fast. We need you back.
Today.
It's urgent. Please call me.
Urgent.
The word echoed in my head like a marble rattling in a glass.
No apology.
Not even a hollow corporate version. Just desperation dressed up as civility. I leaned back on the couch, the coffee on the table long gone cold. I didn't move. My chest rose and fell slowly, the silence between his words still clinging to me. At 10:32, my phone buzzed again. This time a name I hadn't seen in years, Nicole. Once my right hand in client services before she moved to marketing. We hadn't spoken in so long, yet here she was. I answered. Her voice was a whisper, trembling with adrenaline. Lily, you won't believe what's happening here. I almost smiled. Try me. Ryan just got chewed out by his dad. In front of everyone. The entire meeting room. Mr. Cole stormed in and slammed the Kingswell contract on the table. My brows lifted. He brought the contract? Oh yeah. And then he asked one question. Did you read this before firing Lily? My breath caught. And Ryan tried to bluff. Said something about restructuring, moving the company in a new direction. But Mr. Cole wasn't buying it. He flipped right to the clause you always mentioned, the one that names you as the sole negotiator for Kingswell. That clause is ironclad. Everyone knew it, except Ryan. I could hear the murmur of voices in the background, the restless energy of an office on edge. Nicole's voice dropped even lower. Lily, he went white. Ghost white. He realized he might have just cost the company everything. I exhaled, the air leaving me slow, measured. And what did Mr. Cole say? Nicole hesitated. Then, almost in awe, he told him if this deal falls through, your position here becomes negotiable. The words hit me like a quiet thunderclap. The first crack in Ryan's armor. His arrogance was finally catching up to him. Nicole's voice softened. I don't know what you're planning, but whatever it is, you hold the upper hand now. I whispered a thank you, then ended the call. For a long moment, I stood by the window, gazing out at the skyline. The city pulsed as it always did, indifferent to the chaos in our lives. People rushed, horns blared, deals were made and broken in glass towers. The world moved forward, unconcerned. That calm indifference steadied me. At 11:15, another message appeared, this time from Mr. Cole himself. Lily, I'm sincerely sorry for what happened. I misjudged the situation. Please come in. Not just for the deal, but so we can talk. Privately. The words pulled at me, tempting. But I wasn't about to walk back in as though nothing had happened. Ryan's betrayal wasn't just a mistake over a contract. It was about respect. About trust. About 11 years of my life that couldn't be brushed aside with a frantic voicemail. Still, I wasn't bitter. I wasn't petty. What I wanted was simple accountability. I typed my reply slowly, each word deliberate. I'll consider returning to finalize the Kingswell deal, but only under specific conditions. I'd like to speak with Mr. Cole directly beforehand. Then I hit send. I rose, peeled off my pajamas, and began to prepare. By noon, I was standing in the company's lobby. Not through the side door, not through the employee entrance where I used to slip in unnoticed. I walked straight through the main doors like a guest. My heels echoed against the marble floor, each step intentional. Everyone knew I'd been fired yesterday. My presence now was not just a return, it was a statement. The receptionist's eyes widened. She nearly tripped over her words. "Ms. Harris, Lily, Mr. Cole is expecting you. Right this way." As I followed her down the hall, I felt the weight of eyes on me. Conversations faltered. Chairs shifted. A ripple of silence trailed in my wake. The air felt heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Mr. Cole stood at his office door when I arrived. His face was drawn, serious. "Lily," he said with a nod. "Thank you for coming." I returned the nod, but kept my hands at my sides.
No handskak.
He stepped aside, letting me pass. Inside, I took a seat across from his massive oak desk. He shut the door gently, leaned against it for a moment, and released a long, tired sigh. "I made a mistake," he admitted. "A big one. I gave my son too much authority, too fast. I wanted him to prove himself. I didn't expect him to burn bridges before he even knew how to build them." I stayed quiet. He sat down, his voice softer now. "What he did to you is unprofessional, disrespectful, and it jeopardized a deal we've worked over half a year to secure." I nodded.
Yes.
"It did. I read the contract again this morning. Every word. You were given full autonomy over Kingswell. Legally, the client won't recognize anyone else. That clause was there for a reason after Steel Ridge, remember?" "I remember," I said quietly. "I was the one who handled the fallout." His eyes met mine.
Steady.
"You didn't deserve what happened yesterday. I'd like to offer your job back, with full authority to finish the deal. Whatever conditions you need, we'll meet them." There was genuine regret in his voice. Not corporate regret. Human regret. But this wasn't only about a contract anymore.
It was about dignity.
Leadership. The way a company treats the people who give it their lives. "I'll return," I said at last. "But I want everything in writing. A revised contract. Clear autonomy over Kingswell. And no interference from Ryan." He nodded instantly. "Done." "One more thing," I added, my voice firm, unwavering. "This can't happen again. Not to me. Not to anyone." Silence stretched between us. Then he gave a slow, thoughtful nod. "You have my word." I stood. As the door opened, my eyes locked on a figure down the hall. Ryan. Arms crossed, lips pressed thin, pretending to be deep in conversation with some junior executive.
But he saw me.
And I saw him. And in that moment, he knew things had changed. The moment I stepped out of Mr. Cole's office, Ryan's eyes found me. Locked on me like a predator tracking prey. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. My heels struck the floor with a steady rhythm as I walked past him, and I swear, I saw it. The exact second he realized his grip was slipping. Control had shifted, and he hated it. By 1 o'clock, the boardroom was prepared. Glass walls, polished table, every chair in place. The Kingswell team had arrived early, their presence sending a quiet hum of anticipation through the floor. We had 30 minutes before the meeting began. I sat at the head of the table and combed through the documents one final time, every clause, every number I had fought for over the past 6 months. Mr. Saeed, Kingswell's CEO, was a man known for cutting through nonsense. He valued discipline, trust, clarity. Any hint of chaos or weakness would make him walk without looking back. Sliding the Arabic translation of the terms across the table, I caught movement through the glass. Ryan. He was pacing like a caged animal, jaw tight, hands twitching at his sides. Mr. Cole intercepted him, his voice low but firm. Then louder. Then sharp. I watched his hand rise, palm flat, silencing his son. Ryan's face turned crimson. His eyes darted toward me. Rage, humiliation, pure venom burning in them. Then he turned and stormed away. That was the last I saw of him that day. At exactly 1:30, the meeting began. Mr. Saeed walked in with his aides, measured, composed. I greeted him in Arabic, and for the first time in months, his stern features softened into a smile. "You remembered," he said warmly. "Respect goes a long way." That smile was all the confirmation I needed. For 2 hours, the negotiation unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance. Every point was addressed, every objection anticipated. And when we finally shook hands, the deal was sealed. A historic contract, the kind that shifts an entire company's trajectory. After they left, Mr. Cole came to me, his shoulders visibly lighter. Relief poured off him. "You saved us," he said. His voice carried sincerity this time, not corporate polish. "I owe you more than an apology." I met his gaze. My voice was steady. "You owe your company a leader. One who understands the difference between power and responsibility."
He didn't argue.
He didn't even try. That evening, walking toward my car, the weight I had carried for 48 hours began to loosen. I hadn't come back as the same employee who was discarded so carelessly. I had come back with a sharper edge, with clarity about my value, and I demanded it be recognized. But as the cool air brushed against my skin, I also knew the story wasn't finished. Ryan had been silent today.
Too silent.
Men like him don't vanish. They retreat. They plot. And then they retaliate. By the next week, the Kingswell deal had hit the headlines in the industry newsletter. Cole and Company secures a historic cross-border partnership through tailored strategy and multilingual leadership. My name wasn't in print, but inside the building, everyone knew. My inbox flooded with quiet congratulations. Notes from juniors I had mentored years ago. Messages from managers who once dismissed me in meetings, now eager to praise my leadership under fire. Their words warmed me, but I wasn't naive. I knew how quickly people bend with the wind. The atmosphere in the office shifted. Laughter returned to the break room. Smiles in the hallways. Mr. Cole announced that Ryan was no longer involved in major decisions until further notice. Outwardly, the storm had passed, but I felt something unsettled beneath the calm. It started small. My expense report for the Kingswell trip delayed. Then, documents I'd submitted for approval came back and signed, without explanation. Then an email, supposedly from me, containing wrong client data, forwarded to an overseas partner. I was lucky the partner trusted me enough to reach out directly, but doubt had already been planted. When I reported it to IT, their response chilled me. No sign of external breach. The email originated from inside the office. That's when the truth crystallized. Ryan wasn't trying to fire me anymore. That weapon had already backfired. Now he wanted to make me unravel.
Slowly. Quietly.
He was setting traps designed to make me look careless, unprofessional, unstable. It was sabotage. Classic corporate sabotage. I'd seen this game before. Fresh out of university, I worked under a director who perfected the same tactics, cutting off resources, isolating staff, poisoning their names until they had no choice but to vanish. Back then, I was young, unprepared. I broke under the pressure. But I wasn't 22 anymore. And I wasn't going to disappear. This time, I documented everything. Every delayed report. Every mistake that wasn't mine. Every missing signature. Paper trails carry more weight than emotions in places like this. I started keeping a private notebook. Times, dates, conversations. Evidence.
Proof.
Then, one afternoon, confirmation came. I was passing the conference room when Ryan's voice carried through the glass. Too loud. Too deliberate. "She's unstable," he said. "Since she came back, she's been erratic. Aggressive. Not fit to manage high-pressure clients." I froze in the hallway, my pulse steady but cold. "I'm just saying," he continued. "We need to start thinking about succession planning in client services. She's clearly overextended." Another voice responded, hesitant. A newer executive, I guessed. But the Kingswell deal. She pulled that off under serious pressure. Ryan scoffed. "She got lucky. We can't run a company on luck." I stood still for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. My blood didn't boil. It chilled. Because I could see it now, his strategy wasn't reckless anymore. It was calculated. He was planting seeds, poisoning the well, and sooner or later, those seeds would grow. That night I stayed late. The office was hushed, stripped of its daytime noise. Only the faint buzz of lights and the echo of my own footsteps remained. I sat alone in the glass meeting room, watching the city burn with neon outside. Skyscrapers blinked like watchful eyes, and I wondered how many more wars I'd have to fight just to keep doing the work I was born to do. Then footsteps. A voice cut the silence. Still here. I looked up. Mr. Cole. His silhouette framed by the dim corridor. I could ask you the same, I said. He stepped inside, slow, deliberate, and placed a folder on the table between us. His hands lingered on it before pulling away. Your revised contract, he said. Everything we agreed on. I opened it, scanning the pages line by line. The language was clean, solid.
No traps, no hidden clauses.
For once, it was exactly as promised. I gave a slight nod. I've also started an internal audit, he added. His voice was quiet, but heavy. Too many things have been misfiled lately. I froze. My eyes snapped up. He was already watching me. I'm not blind, Lily. I know Ryan isn't finished. Then why haven't you stopped him? My voice came out sharper than I expected.
He paused.
A long, tired pause. When he spoke, he sounded less like a CEO and more like a father with a failing son. Because I needed to see how far he'd go. I studied him. There was fatigue in his shoulders, in the way his gaze drifted. You're protecting the company, I said. He shook his head slowly. I'm trying to protect both of you. But maybe it's already too late for one of you. I closed the folder, pressing my palm against the cool surface. I don't need protection, I told him. I need you to decide what kind of legacy you want to leave behind. His eyes lingered on mine, searching for something, maybe forgiveness, maybe clarity. Then he turned and left. His footsteps echoed down the corridor until I was alone again. And I knew something larger was brewing. The office felt colder the rest of that week. Not from the weather, but from the way people moved. Conversations cut off when I entered a room. Smiles turned brittle. Some colleagues avoided me altogether. Everyone knew about the audit. Everyone felt the tension. I hadn't asked Mr. Cole to launch an investigation, but a part of me was relieved. At least now, the truth would have a chance to surface. And not just for me, for all of us who had been walking on eggshells since Ryan took control. Still, I wasn't foolish. I knew how corporate truth worked. Sometimes it led to justice. More often, it ended in quiet resignations, golden parachutes, reputations buried under red tape. By Thursday, I was called into the audit committee's temporary headquarters. A dusty storage room transformed into a war zone. Stacks of files lined the tables. Screens glowed with data trails. On the whiteboard, timelines, login records, arrows linking names to numbers like a crime scene investigation. David, the lead auditor, greeted me with a steady nod.
Lily.
Thanks for coming. We need to ask you a few questions about recent irregularities.
Iset.
Brace myself. He opened a file on the monitor. First, this email. It looked like it came from your account. We traced it back to a shared workstation near the break room. Your credentials were manually entered. So, someone stole my login? I asked. David shook his head. Not stolen.
Copied.
This wasn't phishing. It was internal. I folded my arms across my chest. I reported this the day it happened. He gave a thin smile. And it helped. Because we found others. Emails altered. Spreadsheets tampered with. Sign-offs removed. Always traced to shared machines. Always under your name. The weight pressed harder against my chest. My throat tightened. This was coordinated, I said flatly. David hesitated, then nodded.
Yes.
And we've narrowed down the access list. We've also seen unusual activity tied to Ryan's executive assistant's account. I sat still, my face a mask, though inside my pulse quickened. He leaned forward carefully. We're not pointing fingers yet, but the evidence shows a pattern. Sabotage. Targeted at you, and maybe others. My jaw clenched. So what happens now? That's where it gets complicated, he said. Mr. Cole wants us to present everything directly to him.
No filters. No edits.
He's asked for the truth, all of it. I nodded slowly. Then I'll be there. David's brows lifted. You're not required. I will be there, I repeated. My voice left no room for debate. If this is going to surface, I want to look every single person in the eye. He didn't argue. He knew better. That night, sleep abandoned me. My mind replayed the faces of colleagues who had left quietly over the past year. Brilliant people, cut down in their prime. Rising stars in their 30s and 40s, suddenly moving on. Back then, I thought it was turnover. Now, I wondered how many had been quietly pushed out, casualties of Ryan's hidden war. The next morning, I arrived early to the executive boardroom. Mr. Cole was already there, staring out the massive window like a man bracing for the final card to fall. One by one, the auditors entered. David and his team. Then Ryan. 10 minutes late, of course.
Smug.
Phone in hand. A smirk plastered across his face. Until he saw me. He froze. His eyes narrowed. She's not on the audit committee. Mr. Cole didn't turn from the window. She's here at my request. Ryan shifted, restless. This is supposed to be internal. Confidential. Then you should have kept it that way, I said calmly, instead of using company resources to fabricate emails. His laugh was sharp, dismissive. That's ridiculous. David spoke up, his voice measured but firm. We've traced multiple login attempts tied to your assistant's account, all connected to irregularities targeting Lily's work. There's a clear timeline. Ryan's practiced smugness faltered. A crack in the armor. You're reaching, he snapped. She's just bitter about being let go. I locked eyes with him. My voice cut through the air like glass. You didn't let me go, Ryan. You sabotaged me. And in the process, you nearly destroyed the biggest deal this company has secured in 5 years. Finally, Mr. Cole turned from the window. His voice was quiet, but each word landed heavy. I gave you a chance, he said. I gave you more than one. And all you've done is tear down the people who are building something real. Ryan tried to recover. This isn't what you think. No, Mr. Cole cut him off. It's worse. The room went silent. A silence so thick it pressed against the walls. Then Mr. Cole stood. The board will be reviewing this report. The air shifted. The reckoning had begun. Until then, you're suspended. Effective immediately. The words landed heavy, final. Ryan's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, searching for a defense, for one of his rehearsed lines, but nothing came. For once, the master manipulator had no script. His eyes darted toward me. Not angry, not mocking, just stunned. Like he had finally realized the tricks that carried him this far had run out of magic. He left without a sound. No fight, no grand exit. Just the sound of his footsteps fading into the hallway, swallowed by the silence he once filled with swagger. I stayed behind. The room felt heavier now, though Ryan was gone. Mr. Cole let out a long breath, shoulders collapsing like a man who had been holding up too much for too long. I failed him, he whispered. As a leader, maybe even as a father. I spoke softly. You can't lead someone who refuses to grow, but you can lead this company. You still have that choice. His eyes met mine. For the first time in weeks, he nodded, not as a CEO, not as a man under pressure, but as someone finally ready to carry the weight with clarity. And in that moment, the grip around my chest loosened. The burden began to lift. 2 weeks passed. The building still hummed with the aftershock of that meeting. Ryan never returned. The smirk he once wore like a crown was reduced to whispers, fragments of gossip traded over coffee machines and hallway glances. The board didn't drag its feet. The evidence was too strong, too detailed, too damning. Falsified emails, manipulated logins, files erased, HR complaints weaponized. All of it tied back to Ryan, directly or through the people he pulled into his orbit. When the final report was released, it was undeniable. He hadn't just targeted me. He had endangered the integrity of the entire company. His suspension turned permanent. Termination. Effective immediately.
No low shots. No headlines.
Just a quiet erasure. A man escorted through the back door of corporate history. But word spread anyway, as it always does. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I didn't. What I felt was steady. Grounded. Like I had walked through the storm, and now, finally, I could breathe. A few days later, Mr. Cole called me into his office.
Close the door, he said. I did.
He sat at his desk, a folder resting in front of him. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he spoke with the weight of a man who had been replaying everything. I've been thinking, he began, about all that's happened, and about what I want this company to stand for moving forward. I stayed silent. Let him carry the thought. You've shown more leadership in a month than some executives show in an entire career. You protected the deal that kept this company alive. You stood tall in the middle of humiliation. You endured sabotage and kept your professionalism intact. He leaned forward. That's the kind of leader I want helping run this place. He pushed the folder across the desk. Inside was a promotion letter. Director of Client Strategy. Executive level. Reporting directly to him. I blinked.
Shocked.
I didn't ask for this. I know, he said gently. That's why you deserve it. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the folder. If I accept this, I want a voice in how we move forward. I don't want just a title. I want to rebuild the culture. The right way. A smile tugged at his mouth. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Later that evening, I sat alone in my new office. Temporary. Unfurnished. Just a desk, a chair, and a blank nameplate on the door. For years, I'd walked these halls wondering if anyone saw the work I poured into this place. The late nights.
The calls saved.
The fires I put out quietly, without credit, without applause. I thought silence was safer. That keeping my head down was the way to survive. But silence almost cost me everything. It wasn't about a contract. It wasn't about a title. It was about the truth I had nearly forgotten. That competence isn't arrogance. That professionalism isn't weakness. I had been underestimated, written off, sabotaged. But I had not been defeated, and I refused to let bitterness take root. That, I realized, was the real victory. The weeks that followed, I began reshaping the department. Old wounds were reopened, but this time to heal. Communication lines restored. People who had been unfairly pushed out were welcomed back. I built an anonymous reporting system, so no one would ever have to choose between speaking up and protecting their career. And I made space for the younger employees, the ones just beginning. Some had watched what I went through, and they asked, quietly, carefully, how I stayed strong. I told them the truth. You don't always get to pick the battles, but you always get to decide who you'll become in the middle of them. As for Ryan, word was, he tried finding work out of state. Smaller firms. But his reputation trailed behind him like a shadow he couldn't outrun. Some whispered that Mr. Cole pulled strings to make sure his name stayed out of the press. Maybe that was a final act of love from a father who had already lost too much. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. One afternoon, I passed the glass wall where the Kingswell negotiation once unfolded. I stopped. For a moment, I let myself remember every detail. The sabotage. The frantic call. The chaos. The fragile, desperate fight to salvage it all. That deal changed my career. But it wasn't the deal that changed me. The real shift happened the day I smiled at Ryan, turned, and walked out of his office without begging. That was the turning point, not because I gave up, but because I finally understood my worth. The cranberry sauce was still simmering when Taylor's phone buzzed again. 7th time that morning. I stood in the doorway, wooden spoon in my hand, and watched the way his face lit up. A brightness I hadn't seen in months. And not for me. Could you help me with the turkey? I called, wrestling with the 20-pound bird I'd been tending since dawn. The kitchen smelled of sage, butter, and roasted skin, just like my mother's kitchen when I was a girl. I'd been up since 5, determined. This Thanksgiving had to be perfect. In a minute, he muttered, head bent, fingers flying across the screen. I carried the turkey myself, the weight digging into my lower back. 47 years old, married 23. And still, I was the only one carrying this family. But I swallowed the sting.
Today wasn't about me. Today was about family.
Hunter had driven in last night from Chicago. He looked sharp in his new suit jacket, though his eyes were heavy with exhaustion. His job drained him, but he showed up. Faith blew in that morning like a storm, arms full of wine, laughter, and stories from grad school. Seeing them both at the table again made every aching hour in the kitchen worth it. The dining room was a picture pulled from memory. My grandmother's china, the delicate blue we saved for moments like this. A centerpiece I'd spent hours arranging, miniature pumpkins, autumn leaves, battery candles flickering like small, stubborn flames.
Taylor had walked by 3 times.
Not a word. Mom, this stuffing is incredible, Hunter said, already reaching for seconds. Is this Grandma's recipe? With a few changes, I smiled, watching him savor. I added dried cherries. Faith lifted her glass.
To Mom.
Another Thanksgiving miracle. Her cheeks flushed with wine, her eyes alive. She looked so young, so full of promise. My chest ached with pride. We clinked glasses. For a moment, everything was right. This was why I folded napkins at 6 a.m. Why I hand-mashed potatoes until my arms burned. For this, warmth, laughter, belonging. Then his phone buzzed again. He looked at it, and something shifted. You okay, Dad? Faith asked. Fine, he said too quickly, sliding it away. His leg bounced under the table. His shoulders squared. His throat cleared. I knew those tells. The man I'd built my life beside was preparing to deliver a blow. Actually, he said, pushing his chair back. The scrape against the hardwood cut the air like a blade. My children froze, forks in midair. Taylor stood tall, his voice rehearsed, smooth like a salesman's pitch. I have something to tell everyone. Taylor. My voice was small, a warning. Can't this wait until after dinner?
He didn't look at me.
I'm selling the house. The words hit like a physical strike. Faith's wine glass stilled midair. Hunter's fork clattered to his plate. What? Faith whispered. Taylor's gaze fixed somewhere beyond us. His voice steady, detached, like he was presenting quarterly numbers. Holly and the kids need more space. Jack's 8. Joel's 6. Elise just turned 4. They're growing fast. Her apartment's too small. Silence swallowed the room. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the clock tick, my heartbeat pounding in my ears.
Holly.
He said her name here, at my table, on Thanksgiving. Hunter's face drained of color. Dad, what are you talking about? Holly's my girlfriend, Taylor said, as if discussing the weather. We've been together 8 months. She has 3 kids. They need stability. A real home. Faith made a sound like someone had punched the breath from her lungs. Girlfriend. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, watching my children break apart in front of me. This was how he chose to tell them. Not gently, not privately, not with care. A transaction. A deal. The house will sell quickly in this market, he went on, blind to the wreckage. Holly found a beautiful place in Westfield. 5 bedrooms. Big backyard. Great schools. The kids will love it. Faith's voice was a whisper, shredded. What about us?
I didn't speak. Not yet.
My silence was the only thing holding me together. My hand slipped into my purse. My fingers touched the envelope I'd placed there days ago. A plan of my own. If he wanted announcements, I had one too. What about Mom? The question cut through the silence, sharp as glass. Finally, he looked at me. Defiance flickered in his eyes, like he was daring me to react.
Cry. Scream. Beg.
Give him the chance to label me hysterical. The unhinged wife standing in the way of his happiness. But I didn't. I rose slowly, steady, deliberate. My heels clicked against the floor as I crossed to the counter, where my purse waited. My hands didn't tremble as I reached inside. I'd been carrying that envelope for 3 weeks, waiting for the right time, or maybe for the cruelest time. And here it was. I walked back, slid the envelope onto the table, directly in front of him, right over the gravy stain he'd left during his little performance. "Since you're making announcements," I said softly, finally locking eyes with him. Then I sat, picked up my fork, took a bite of sweet potatoes. They tasted like ash, but I chewed anyway. The envelope lay between us like a live grenade. For the first time all evening, Taylor faltered. His fingers hovered above the cream-colored paper, like it might burn him. The smug certainty, the polished confidence, it was gone, replaced by hesitation.
Fear.
"What is it, Dad?" Hunter's voice sliced through the air. His fork rested untouched. His jaw was tight, his stare fixed on the man he thought he knew. The father he'd looked up to his whole life was suddenly a stranger. Taylor turned the envelope over. My careful cursive spelled his name. The same handwriting I'd used on every anniversary card, every birthday note for over 20 years. Except this one felt different. Final. "Jordan, what?" His words trailed off when he met my gaze. I gave him nothing.
No hint. No merci.
Let him sweat. Let him feel a fraction of the dread he'd handed me. Faith was staring at both of us, her glass forgotten in her hand.
"Mom?
"Are you okay?" Her voice was soft, frightened. My daughter, still reeling from the wreckage her father had just dropped on her life. I reached across the table, wrapped her free hand in mine.
"I've fine, sweetheart."
And I meant it. For the first time in months, I felt in control. Taylor tucked the envelope into his jacket without opening it, relief flickering across his face like a fool who thought avoidance was safety. But I saw the way his hand kept drifting back to his pocket. The weight of that envelope gnawed at him. "Aren't you going to open it?" Hunter asked, voice edged with steel. "Later," Taylor muttered, reaching for his water, his throat dry. The atmosphere shifted. Warmth had evaporated. The table, once filled with laughter and connection, was now thick with unease. Faith's eyes moved between us, searching for answers she didn't yet have. Hunter sat rigid, no longer eating, every muscle locked tight. I cut another piece of turkey, savored it. Perfectly roasted.
Moist.
Every hour of labor in that kitchen still mattered. If nothing else, this meal would be unforgettable. "So," I said casually, my voice a quiet blade, "how long has Holly been helping you decide what happens in our home?" Taylor's fork slipped, clattering against his plate. "Jordan, not now." "When then?" I asked, still calm. "After you've packed my clothes? After you've changed the locks?" Faith's glass hit the table, harder than she meant. Her voice cracked. "You're really doing this? You're leaving Mom for some woman with kids?" "It's complicated," Taylor offered, the empty excuse of a man too weak to admit the truth. "No," Hunter cut in, his tone sharp. "It's not complicated at all." That's when the phone started buzzing. He looked down and there it was. Her name, glowing on the screen. Holly. She couldn't even give us one night. Couldn't let him destroy his family without clawing for his attention mid-meal. "Answer it," I said quietly. "Don't let us keep you from your priorities." He declined, his face flushed, his excuses ready. "It's work." Faith laughed, bitter, joyless. "On Thanksgiving?" At 7 o'clock. The phone buzzed again. And again. Taylor's composure cracked. His leg bounced wildly under the table, his hand pressing against the envelope like it might anchor him. "You know what?" Hunter shoved back his chair, the napkin sliding to the floor. He stood, towering, his disappointment so heavy it pressed against all of us. "I've lost my appetite." His eyes burned into his father's face. 23 years of marriage. 23 years of family. And you stand here, announce your affair like you're talking about business strategy. "Hunter, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he said, his voice like ice. "You decided your happiness was worth more than Mom's dignity, worth more than our traditions. Worth more than looking your children in the eye without lying. Taylor opened his mouth, but Hunter was already gone. His footsteps pounded up the stairs, followed by the sharp click of his bedroom door closing. Faith sat frozen, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to let fall. And I just kept eating. Daddy. Faith's voice cracked on the word. A name she hadn't called him in years, spoken now, like a plea from the child she used to be. How could you do this to us? For one fleeting second, Taylor's mask slipped. Regret crossed his face, raw, real, undeniable. A flicker of pain at wounding his daughter. But then his phone buzzed again, shattering the moment. This time he answered. He turned away from us, his voice low. I can't talk right now. But Faith, and I could hear her.
Holly.
Her voice sharp, insistent, angry at being ignored. We couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. She was demanding, impatient. The sound of another woman pushing her way into my family's Thanksgiving dinner. I said I can't talk, Taylor repeated, strained. He hung up, placed the phone face down like it was something shameful. The silence after was heavy, deafening. Faith's eyes stayed on him, wide and hollow. She looked at her father like she was meeting a stranger for the very first time. I kept eating. The scrape of my fork against porcelain filled the void. Sometimes silence carried more weight than words ever could. I think I need some air. Faith rose carefully, each movement measured, as though one wrong shift might cause her to break. Mom, do you want help clearing the table? That's all right, sweetheart, I said gently. Go. Breathe. She left. And then it was just us. Taylor and me. Two people sitting across from each other at the same table where we'd shared birthdays, Christmas mornings, Sunday dinners. Countless plans, countless promises. Now it was a battlefield. And in his pocket, that envelope pulsed like a live bomb. Jordan, he finally said. We need to talk. I looked at him. Really looked. When had his face become that of a stranger? When had the man I'd trusted with my whole heart turned into someone who could dismantle his family with the casual cruelty of a man ordering dessert? No, I said simply. I stood, stacking plates. We really don't. That night, I went to bed early. Turned the lock. I heard him downstairs pacing, restless, his footsteps echoing like guilt itself. Probably working up the nerve to open the envelope. Let him pace. Let him wonder. For once, the torment belonged to him. And me? I slept better than I had in months. The morning after Thanksgiving, the house was empty. Taylor had slipped out before dawn, still avoiding the truth pressing against his chest pocket. I brewed coffee in the quiet kitchen. Steam rose from the mug as memories I'd been burying for months finally clawed their way back. It had started in March. An ordinary Tuesday. Or so I thought. Taylor came home late, 3 hours late. His collar wrinkled, his excuse rehearsed. Client meeting ran long. I'd microwaved his dinner, asked about his day, listened to his tired words like the perfect, trusting wife. But something felt wrong. His eyes didn't meet mine. He showered immediately, instead of collapsing on the couch the way he usually did. Small things. Tiny cracks. The late nights multiplied. Big presentation tomorrow. Don't wait up. I'd lie awake, watching the clock shift from midnight to 1. From 1 to 2. When I questioned him, he sighed like I was the problem. Like my doubt was the insult, not his absence. By April, it wasn't just late nights. It was canceled plans. Our anniversary dinner at Chez Laurent, the same restaurant where he'd asked me to marry him, vanished under the excuse of a client emergency. My birthday theater tickets went unused. Suddenly, there was always a flight, always a crisis, always later. Later never came. That's when Holly Morrison entered our lives. At first, just a name. Casual. Professional. Holly thinks we should restructure the reports. Holly suggested a new system. Just another colleague. Another voice he seemed to value too much. And then I saw her. The first photo didn't scare me. Office Christmas party. A group shot. Holly, blonde, petite, glowing, standing just close enough to catch my eye. Younger, fresher, untouched by the years that had carved lines across my face. The second photo broke me. Taylor and Holly in a coffee shop. Her 3 children gathered close, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. A little girl perched on his lap, as if she had always known him. And the worst part? He was smiling. A smile I hadn't seen in years. I found it by accident, scrolling his phone to check the weather. The photo was dated on a Saturday. He claimed to be golfing with Marcus, his college buddy. "Who are these children?" I'd asked that night, showing him the screen. My voice calm, giving him every chance to tell the truth. He barely glanced before launching into his script. "That's Holly from work. She's going through a messy divorce. Needed someone to talk to. Those are her kids. Cute, right? Poor things are struggling." His words were smooth, practiced. Too smooth. He even played the role of compassionate savior. But I noticed the way he snatched the phone back. The way his thumb darted, deleting the photo without hesitation. "You're helping her with her divorce?" I pressed. Gentle, controlled. "Someone has to." His voice carried a sharp edge. The kind of tone that ended conversations. "She doesn't have many friends, Jordan." And in that moment, I felt the first fracture split wide open. "Sometimes people just need support during hard times," he told me. And I wanted to believe him, desperately. So I silenced the unease clawing at my chest. I chose trust over suspicion. Because this was Taylor. My Taylor. The man who brought me coffee in bed on Sundays. The man who remembered my favorite wine without needing to be asked. The man who, for decades, had been my partner, my comfort, my safe place. But then came the phone calls. And the name. Always her name. Holly. Lighting up his screen at dinner. During morning coffee. Even during Hunter's graduation ceremony. The vibration, the glow, the quick glance at her name. Then the frown as he let it go to voicemail. "She's having a rough time," he'd say. Probably needs advice about the custody battle. The custody battle that didn't exist. Holly had been divorced 3 years. I would find that out later. One evening in July, Faith called while Taylor was upstairs working. We were chatting about her internship when she mentioned casually, "I saw Dad at the park near my apartment. He was with some woman. And her kids. Playing on the swings. Looked like a family." My heart stilled. What did she look like? Blonde.
Pretty.
Younger than you. A pause. The kids were adorable. 2 boys and a little girl. Dad was pushing the girl on the swing. She was giggling so hard. It was sweet. But what, honey? I forced my voice calm. It was weird. Seeing Dad with someone else's kids. He looked so natural. Like it wasn't the first time. And the way she looked at him, her voice trailed off. "Mom, is everything okay between you and Dad?"
Elite. Smoothly.
Protecting her. Protecting myself. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Dad probably just ran into a coworker and her kids. You know how he is with children." She accepted it. Hung up. But I sat in the dark living room for hours. Staring into the shadows. Letting every piece of the puzzle I'd been refusing to see click together. The late nights. The canceled plans. The constant calls. The photos. And now my daughter witnessing my husband playing father to another woman's children. That's when I stopped fighting for his attention. And started paying attention instead. I listened more closely. To the careful tones of his explanations. To the tiny inconsistencies in his stories. I studied his face when his phone rang. Watched his expression shift depending on who it was. I documented the changes in our finances. Withdrawals without explanation. Restaurant charges I'd never seen. Cash vanishing with no reason at all. Then in September he said the word. Downsizing. Casual. Over breakfast. As if discussing the weather. Housing market's hot right now. Might be smart to downsize while we can get top dollar. He didn't look up from his tablet. I knew then. He wasn't downsizing with me. He was upsizing with her. But Taylor made a fatal mistake in his deception. He underestimated me. He assumed I was the passive, trusting wife who would swallow every excuse, who would sit silently as he dismantled our life piece by piece. He had no idea I'd already sat across from Clayton Richards, one of the toughest divorce attorneys in the state. Clayton's office smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Power hung in the air, the kind of place where lives were dissected with precision. I sat across from his gleaming mahogany desk, my hands folded as he reviewed the file I'd built. Bank statements, credit card records, photos printed from social media, a parallel life documented in detail. "Mrs. Davidson," he said, his silver hair catching the late afternoon light. "Are you certain you want to proceed this way?" "Yes," I answered, steady. "I need to protect myself. And my children. My husband thinks I'm naive. I'd prefer to keep it that way. For now." What I didn't tell him was how I'd found Holly's online life. Ironically, it had been Faith who first mentioned it. "Dad's coworker is always posting family pictures," she said one day. "Makes me miss being little." The name stuck. Holly Morrison. One evening, while Taylor was working late, I searched. And there it was. Her profile was a carefully curated storybook. Photos of her children at parks I recognized. Restaurants Taylor had mentioned for client lunches. Even the ice cream parlor where he used to take Hunter and Faith when they were small. But it wasn't just the places. It was the captions. "Sunday adventures with my favorite people," she wrote under a picture of her daughter on the same swing set where Taylor had pushed Faith 20 years ago. A little girl laughing, blonde pigtails flying, while a man's hands, his hands, the ones I'd know anywhere, steadied her. Another photo. Her boys building sandcastles on the beach. Caption. "Teaching them that new beginnings can be beautiful." Posted the same weekend Taylor claimed to be at a mandatory work retreat. And there, blurred in the background but undeniable, was Taylor's blue polo shirt. The one hanging in our closet, the evidence was right there. The betrayal documented for anyone to see. He wasn't just living a double life. He was rehearsing a replacement. The post that gutted me came in October. A photograph. Simple. Intimate. A small dinner table lit by soft candlelight. Holly's children in matching pajamas. Their tiny faces glowing in the warmth of the flame. A man seated among them, his face deliberately cropped out of the frame. The caption, "Grateful for the man who shows my babies what real love looks like." Some people come into your life and make you realize what you've been missing. 37 likes. 12 comments. Friends and family celebrating her happiness. Congratulating her on finding someone special. I sat frozen before my laptop, the screen burning into my eyes, my chest tightening until I could barely breathe. My mind kept circling one thought. How many of these people know her special someone is married? But it wasn't the photos that exposed the depth of Taylor's betrayal. It was the money. Bills at home piling up unpaid. Our credit cards stretched to the limit. And then statements I'd never seen. I stumbled across them by accident. An envelope delivered to our address for Mr. and Mrs. T. Davidson. But the Mrs. wasn't me. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were statements for a joint credit card. His name. Her name. Together. The transactions painted the picture of a life. Their life. Grocery stores. Toy shops. Children's clothing. $600 at Little Dreamers Furniture. Bunk beds, no doubt, for her boys. $400 at Princess Palace Boutique. For her daughter. Meanwhile, I was dipping into my own savings to keep the lights on, covering the mortgage he claimed was delayed. Then came the receipts I found in his jacket pocket. Harmless at first glance. Target. CVS. Ordinary places. But the items told a story I couldn't ignore. Children's Tylenol. Princess and superhero Band-Aids. Bedtime storybooks. And then one that broke me. A birthday cake. White box, pink lettering across the receipt. Happy 4th birthday, Elise. He was playing father in another household. Building memories with children who weren't his, while his own son and daughter wondered why their father had grown so distant. That's when I began building my case. Piece by piece. Screenshots of her social media posts. copies of financial statements, photos of receipts. I wasn't gathering evidence to destroy him. I was gathering it to protect myself. Because Clayton had warned me. Men like Taylor, he'd said during our second meeting, rewrite history. They frame money as business expenses. They downplay photographs as misunderstandings. They are masters at controlling the story. Your job is to make sure there's another story, one they can't erase. So every Friday I made my deposit. A manila folder tucked beneath my arm as I walked into a bank across town. A safety deposit box where I stored the truth. Evidence of a second life. My silent preparation for war. The breaking point came on our anniversary, October 15th. Once, it had meant roses, wine, and whispered promises about the future. This year, I made the reservation myself, Chez Laurent, the same place where he had proposed all those years ago. I bought a new dress. Black. The one he had once told me made me unforgettable. At 5 o'clock, I zipped the dress. At 5:30, I touched up my lipstick one last time. By 6, I was at the front door, keys in hand, ready to leave. At 6:15, the call came. Jordan. His voice rushed, apologetic. I'm so sorry. Holly's having an emergency. Complete breakdown about the custody situation. I can't leave her alone with the kids. Can we postpone? Maybe this weekend? I stood in the entryway, staring at my reflection. A woman dressed for celebration. A wife waiting for a husband who is across town, playing hero in another woman's crisis. The woman he once denied. The relationship he once minimized. The children who now meant more than the family he had built with me. My voice was calm. Ice calm. Of course. Family emergencies come first. After I hung up, I didn't take the dress off. I didn't wipe away the makeup. Instead, I drove to Chez Laurent alone. I sat at our table for two, ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu, smiled politely as the waitstaff pretended not to notice. That night, in the quiet of my car, parked outside the restaurant where we'd once dreamed about forever, I called Clayton. It's time, I said simply. The next morning, while Taylor slept in, exhausted, no doubt, from his night of emotional support, I sat with Clayton and his team. For 4 hours, we mapped strategy. Step by step. Move by move. The element of surprise is your greatest advantage, Clayton told me. Men like your husband operate from a place of assumed control. They make plans under the illusion their wives will always stay passive. Predictable. But I was no longer predictable. After Thanksgiving, the house slowed to a crawl. Taylor moved through it like a ghost, the envelope still burning a hole in his pocket. He checked for it constantly, jacket, briefcase, nightstand, reassuring himself it was there. But he never opened it. I moved through my days with a calm that surprised even me. I cooked. I cleaned. I smiled when spoken to. Inside, I was already gone. And he had no idea. Mornings looked normal. Coffee brewing. News humming softly in the background. Afternoons filled with errands, the rhythm of daily life. Evenings winding down like nothing had changed. But beneath the surface, I was electric. Charged. Waiting. Every time Taylor's hand brushed that envelope. Every time he opened his mouth, then shut it again. I felt like a pianist sitting in silence before the final note, knowing exactly when to strike. It was Thursday morning, 1 week after the Thanksgiving he destroyed. I was standing at the stove, pouring batter onto the pan, when I heard him on the stairs. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate. A man walking toward a reckoning. He appeared in the doorway, the cream-colored envelope clutched in his hand, trembling like it might explode. His hair uncombed, eyes bloodshot, sleepless, hollow. Good, I thought. Jordan, he rasped, his voice broken. What is this? I flipped a pancake, smooth and steady. I didn't look at him. Open it. You'll see. The sound of paper tearing cut through the kitchen. Then the rustle of documents sliding free. Legal words. Binding signatures. The kind of paperwork that changes everything. Silence followed. A long, endless silence that pressed down on the room like a weight. Finally, he whispered, You Transferred the deed. I turned, met his eyes. His face had drained of color. His hands shook so violently the papers rattled. 3 months ago, I said calmly, almost casually, as though we were talking about the weather. Amazing how much paperwork goes unread when you're busy playing house with someone else's family.
His jaw tightened.
The hiss of rage slipped out before he could stop it. You set me up. You planned this whole thing. I sipped my coffee. Let the warmth fill me. I protected myself. There's a difference. His lips parted.
Closed.
His mind was racing. The house, he stopped. Panic flickered across his face. Holly's expecting. We've been planning. Holly's expecting a house that was never yours to give. I cut in. I placed my mug down with deliberate care. Funny how that works. Right then, his phone buzzed. Holly's name lit the screen. The color drained from his face entirely. He hesitated, then answered on the fourth ring, his voice falsely cheerful. Hey, babe. Even across the kitchen, I could hear her.
Sharp. Direct.
Taylor, I've been thinking about the timeline for the house sale. The kids are excited about their bedrooms. I want to start shopping for furniture. When will we have the paperwork signed? His eyes flicked to mine. I smiled, lifted my coffee again, and waited. Actually, Holly, he stammered, there's been a complication. Silence. Ice-cold silence on the other end. Her voice returned, low and dangerous. What kind of complication? The house isn't, technically, in my name anymore. Confusion cracked into fury. What do you mean it's not in your name? It's your house. Taylor looked at me like I might save him. I turned back to my pancakes, hummed softly. Jordan transferred the deed, he admitted finally. Without telling me. I found out today. The explosion that followed was spectacular. Her voice climbed to a pitch so sharp it could have shattered glass. Words like betrayed, manipulated, lying snake. She tore into him, each syllable striking harder than the last. And then, the line that gutted him. So, let me get this straight. You promised me and my children a home you never even owned? You made me believe in a future that didn't exist. You're just another cheating husband with nothing to offer. Holly, please. Don't you dare, Holly, please me. I wasted 8 months of my life on you. My children believed in a life you couldn't deliver. And you lied. To all of us. The line went dead. Taylor lowered the phone slowly, staring at it as though it had bitten him. She hung up. Shocking, I said dryly. Who could have guessed a woman searching for financial security might lose interest when the money runs out? His phone buzzed again. And again.
And again.
I couldn't see the screen, but his face told me everything. Whatever she sent, whatever she said, ended them. Then came his desperate pivot. His voice breaking. 23 years. 23 years of marriage, Jordan, and you destroy it all with paperwork. That's when I turned to him. Fully. For the first time in weeks, I let the anger show. I destroyed it. I destroyed our marriage. I slammed the spatula onto the counter, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. You stood in our dining room, in front of our children, and announced you were selling our home. For your girlfriend's convenience. And somehow I'm the one who ended this.
He tried to speak.
I cut him off. My voice sharp as glass. When, Taylor? When was I supposed to talk to you? Between your late nights at the office? Your emergency calls from Holly? The lies about golf games? The secret credit cards?
Tell me.
When exactly was I supposed to talk to the stranger wearing my husband's face? By afternoon, I watched him pace the living room, phone clutched tight, leaving voicemail after voicemail. Desperate. Begging. Hunter finally picked up on the fourth call. His voice rang clear enough for me to hear across the room. We're standing with Mom. And then the line went dead again. You made your choice at Thanksgiving, Hunter had told him. We've made ours. When Taylor tried Faith that evening, her response was colder. Don't call me again until you're ready to apologize to Mom. And I mean really apologize. Not that fake corporate speech you give when you're trying to save face. By Saturday, I was standing in the same kitchen he had once promised to another woman, laying out fresh croissants, bowls of berries, and the expensive coffee I used to ration when money was tight. My book club gathered around the island, 8 women who had seen me through 2 decades of life. Their laughter rose like sunlight, filling a house that had felt haunted for months. Margaret reached for a strawberry and studied me. "Jordan, you seem lighter,
Relaxed.
you're glowing." I looked at the women who had carried me through storms, at the walls I had fought to protect, at the life that was still mine. "I feel like I've finally stopped holding my breath," I said. And for the first time in months, it was true. The divorce papers came on a Tuesday in February. A courier knocked at my door, his apologetic smile almost as heavy as the envelope in his hand. Taylor had filed first, his last attempt to control a story that was already slipping like water through his fingers. Clayton had warned me. "Men like Taylor need to believe they're in charge," he'd said during one of our strategy sessions. "Let him file. Let him think he's steering the ship. Meanwhile, we'll already be 3 steps ahead." I set the papers on the counter, without opening them. There would be time to dissect his version of our marriage later. Right then, I had a life to rebuild. By January, Taylor was gone. He packed his clothes and walked out, leaving behind 23 years of memories as if they belonged to strangers. He rented a modest apartment across town. Not the grand house he had dangled in front of Holly, but a place to lick his wounds while he regrouped. Faith mentioned later that Holly had given him an ultimatum after the breakup, proof of stability or lose her for good. Taylor, of course, chose to fight for her. Then April arrived with sunlight and betrayal dressed as news. Faith called one morning, her voice bubbling with disbelief. "Mom, you're not going to believe this. Dad's getting remarried. To Holly. In June." I nearly dropped my coffee. "Remarried? Already? I know, right? The divorce isn't even final." But apparently Holly forgave him after he promised they'd try for a baby. She wants her kids to have a sibling. And Dad's all in. A baby. At 51, Taylor was about to start all over, rewriting his life with a woman 20 years younger. The audacity left me breathless. "Are you invited?" I asked carefully. Faith's laugh was bitter. "We both were. Hunter and me. Dad even sent formal invitations, like we're distant relatives." Hunter tossed his in the trash. "I might go, just to watch the circus." After we hung up, I sat in my garden for a long time, stunned. The man who once complained about diaper duty was now promising sleepless nights and bottles all over again. But something about Holly's urgency gnawed at me. She was 32, still young. Why rush? Why demand a baby so quickly? The answer came in May. I was at the grocery store, pushing my cart through the pharmacy aisle, when I spotted Holly. She was tucked against the shelves, whispering angrily into her phone. I froze. Then, against every moral instinct, I ducked behind a vitamin display and listened. "The custody agreement requires it," she snapped. "If I want to relocate the kids out of state, their father needs proof my new husband can provide for additional children. Some archaic clause about family planning and stability." My chest tightened. A fertility test. She needed Taylor to prove he could still father children. Proof to satisfy a court. Proof to secure her freedom. But Holly didn't know what I knew. She didn't know what Taylor had forgotten in the haze of his midlife fantasy. A secret buried 24 years ago. That night, I picked up the phone I had avoided for months. "Dr. Martinez? This is Jordan Davidson. I need to ask you about something confidential. About Taylor." He had been our family physician for decades. He delivered both my children, treated Taylor's blood pressure, carried pieces of our history only he remembered. "Jordan," he said warmly, "how can I help?" "Taylor's getting remarried. His new wife wants children. I need to know, does he remember the results of that fertility test he took after Faith was born?" The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, his voice returned. Firm. Careful. "Jordan, that information is confidential. I can't discuss a patient's medical history, even with a spouse." I closed my eyes, steadied my voice. But hypothetically, if someone needed those results for legal purposes, would the records still exist? Another pause. Then, quietly, Hypothetically, medical records are maintained for 30 years. And hypothetically, Dr. Martinez said, his voice careful, if someone with legal standing requested those records during a divorce proceeding, he let the words trail off. He didn't need to finish. I understood perfectly. The next morning, I called Clayton. My voice was calm, deliberate. I need you to subpoena Taylor's complete medical history. Within a week, the files were in our hands. 2 decades of checkups, prescriptions, and test results. Buried inside those pages was the secret Taylor had begged Dr. Martinez to keep hidden. A single test done 24 years ago, when Faith was still a newborn. The irony was staggering. After Faith's difficult birth, Taylor had gone behind my back, terrified about the idea of more children. He had tested his fertility. The results were damning, severely compromised. Not impossible, but unlikely without medical help. He had never told me. Instead, he let me carry the blame for our inability to expand our family. For years, I believed it was my body that had failed us. And now, decades later, that same test was about to dismantle the new life he had promised Holly. Clayton timed everything with precision. The records would be delivered to Taylor on the morning of his wedding. Not to punish him, but because Holly's custody hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. The truth would surface at exactly the right moment. That Saturday, while Taylor dressed for vows that would never be spoken, I was in my garden, planting roses where his golf clubs had once cluttered the garage. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. He had abandoned space. I was filling it with beauty. At 4:30, my phone buzzed.
Faith.
Her voice was tight, trembling with suppressed laughter. Mom, you're not going to believe this. Try me. The wedding's off. Holly found out Dad can't have kids. She was getting her hair done when the medical records arrived. She opened them right there in the salon. By the time Dad showed up at the venue, she was already gone with her kids. Packed up. Vanished. I closed my eyes, tilted my face toward the sun, and exhaled. That's unfortunate. Faith hesitated. Mom, you wouldn't happen to know anything about those records, would you? Your father's medical history is his own business, I said truthfully. If he chose not to tell his fiancée the truth, that's between them. That evening, I sat on the porch with Hunter and Faith, a bottle of wine between us. The sky blazed with streaks of orange and violet, the kind of sunset that feels like closure. Somewhere across town, Taylor was likely sitting in an empty banquet hall, staring at untouched centerpieces, watching a future he had promised dissolve into nothing. Meanwhile, we were right where we belonged. On the porch of the home he once tried to give away, building new memories, proving that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's choosing joy anyway. It's refusing to let another person's choices poison your peace. Karma, I learned, doesn't knock on your door when you expect it. But when it arrives, its timing is flawless. Months passed. Autumn arrived. One morning, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. Heavy cardstock, cream-colored, elegant script. A formal invitation. Hunter's engagement party. The date was set for the first weekend in November at the same country club where he had learned to swim as a child. My fingers brushed over the embossed lettering. My son was stepping into his own life, his own promise of forever. Hunter had found love with Sarah, a brilliant architect with a laugh that softened him in ways I hadn't seen since he was a boy. They had been together for 2 years, but this year had changed something in them. Their bond carried weight now, permanence, partnership. Faith was thriving too. She'd graduated at the top of her class and landed a coveted job with a prestigious environmental law firm in Seattle. Her voice, in our weekly calls, carried a confidence I had never heard before. It was as if watching me rebuild had given her permission to dream without limits. And me? The house was mine now. Not just legally, spiritually. I painted the living room a soft sage green. Hung artwork I loved, without asking anyone's opinion. Turned Taylor's old office into a reading nook filled with plants, sunlight, and silence. The house breathed differently now, lighter, freer, as though the walls themselves had exhaled. Mornings became sacred. Coffee on the back porch. 20 minutes of yoga in the sunroom. Then whatever the day brought, without the tension that had once strangled me. Sometimes I gardened. Sometimes I painted watercolors that would never hang in a gallery, but filled me with quiet pride. On Wednesdays, I volunteered at the women's shelter downtown, guiding others through the labyrinth of starting over. Clayton had become more than my attorney. He had become a friend. Wise, steady, grounded. Our professional relationship had ended when the divorce papers were finalized 6 months earlier, but we still met for coffee, swapping book recommendations or debating politics. He had never remarried after his own divorce 15 years ago. Neither of us had named it, but there was a gentle possibility in our friendship, the kind that didn't demand but simply existed. Taylor's story? It took a different path. After Holly's departure, he unraveled. 3 months later, he lost his job. Officially, it was restructuring. In truth, everyone knew the collapse of his reputation had caught up with him.
Professionally. Personally.
Publicly, Holly didn't just leave Taylor. She erased him. One morning she packed her children, her things, and her pride, and vanished to Arizona with a new boyfriend. No forwarding address. No second chances. I heard the details later through Hunter.
Taylor was scraping by now.
Freelance consulting, barely enough to cover rent on a studio apartment. Driving a beat-up sedan that rattled when it turned corners. The man who once strutted through boardrooms, reshaping people's futures with a wave of his hand, was learning how to survive with nothing. Nothing but pride, and even that was fractured, bruised, unreliable. But the call came last month. Unexpected.
Direct.
His name lit up my phone. For the first time since the divorce, Taylor's voice filled my ear. It was small, stripped of the arrogance I'd known for decades. "Jordan," he said, pausing like the word itself hurt. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I need to know, will you be at Hunter's engagement party?" The question stopped me cold. "Of course I will," I answered without hesitation. "He's my son." "I want to come too," he said quietly. "But not if it makes you uncomfortable. I know I lost the right to claim space at our children's milestones. Still, I'd like to try. To rebuild something with them, if that's even possible." I sat in my kitchen, staring out the window at the garden where his golf clubs had once leaned against the wall. A year ago, I might have struck hard. I might have thrown every mistake, every betrayal, back at him. But the woman I had become didn't need his pain to validate my healing. "Taylor," I said finally, "Hunter and Faith are grown. Their relationships with you are theirs to decide. I won't be the reason you can't try." When the engagement party arrived, October dressed itself in perfection. Crisp air. A sky so blue it looked painted. The kind of day that whispers possibility. I wore a navy dress that felt like confidence stitched into fabric. Paired it with the pearl earrings my mother once clasped onto my ears before high school dances. I drove with the windows down, music pulsing, air filling my lungs. The country club buzzed with warmth and laughter. Hunter stood tall in a charcoal suit, his arm linked with Sarah's. She glowed in champagne silk, a light in her eyes that matched his. They moved together easily, pausing to hug friends, to laugh with family, to accept blessings for a future they clearly believed in. Taylor arrived halfway through cocktail hour. I saw him before he saw me, standing in the doorway, scanning the crowd like a man unsure of his place. He'd lost weight. His hair carried more gray than memory had recorded. His suit was carefully chosen, though it couldn't disguise the wear in his shoulders. Hunter spotted him first. I held my breath, searching my son's face, waiting for anger, bracing for rejection. But what I saw instead was something softer. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a loosening. The edges of rage worn down into something more complicated. Hunter walked toward him, Sarah by his side. They spoke quietly. Then, to my surprise, Hunter introduced Sarah to his father, the man who had missed so much of their love story. Minutes later, Faith joined them. She stood poised, guarded, but she stayed. I watched from across the room as my children made their own choices about redemption. They were polite, respectful, not warm, not cold, neutral. Taylor's place in their lives would have to be earned slowly, carefully, one conversation at a time. And there was no guarantee. Later, I stepped outside onto the terrace. The golf course stretched out before me, the same course where Taylor had once wasted Saturdays while I folded laundry alone. The irony tasted sweet. Here I was, standing tall in the world he used to dominate, while he remained inside, trying to salvage connections he had set on fire for someone who never truly knew him. Clayton appeared at my side, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "How are you holding up?" he asked, handing one to me. I took it, thought about it, and answered honestly. "Better than fine."
Good.
"Really, genuinely good." He smiled. "You've earned it." Through the tall glass windows, I watched Hunter and Sarah cut their cake, laughter rising like music. Faith snapped photos, her face lit with joy. And Taylor, he stood a little apart, uncertain, grateful just to have been allowed in the room. This was my new life. Not perfect, but honest. Built not on pretense, not on compromise, but on choices I had made for myself. I understood something now. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's reconstruction. Not tearing down the one who hurt you, but building something stronger out of what they left behind. The woman I was last Thanksgiving had been terrified of losing everything. The woman I was now knew the truth. Sometimes losing everything is simply another way of saying, you're free. Free to choose. Free to begin again. And standing there on that terrace, the horizon stretched before me, wide with promise.
Mine. Entirely mine.
That Christmas Eve in Ohio, the air cut through me like glass. My jacket was thin, useless against the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I stood in front of the oak door, its polished surface glowing faintly under the porch light. In my hand, the phone still carried the warmth of my grandfather's voice. "Dorian, come over right now. I'm at your parents' new house," he had said. His tone had been rich with excitement, almost boyish, as if he was holding on to a secret he couldn't wait to share. Grandpa Will, the man who built an empire out of concrete and steel in Chicago. He was rarely home, rarely present, always buried in work and contracts. But tonight, on this freezing night, he was here. That thought alone made me smile, even as my fingers stiffened in the cold. I pushed open the door. The warmth of the fireplace rushed to greet me, wrapping around me like an embrace I hadn't known I needed. The smell of roasted meat lingered in the air, heavy and comforting. At the head of the long dining table sat my grandfather. His eyes lit up when they found mine, sparkling the way stars look on the clearest winter nights. He stood, reached for me, and held me so tightly that his familiar woody cologne washed away every ounce of fatigue I carried. "Dorian, do you like this house?" His voice carried pride, as though he had just placed a crown in my hands. "Yes, it's beautiful, Grandpa," I said carefully, keeping my tone steady. "But it's my parents' house." The silence that followed wasn't just silence. It was thunder held back, the world holding its breath. My grandfather's face stiffened. His gaze flickered, first to me, then to my father, Gregory, and finally to Susan, my stepmother, who sat stiff across the table. My father's calm veneer cracked. His face paled. His hand trembled as the wine glass shivered between his fingers. Susan coughed, her lips forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I saw the panic hiding there, like a shadow behind glass. "Your parents' house?" Grandpa repeated. His voice turned sharp, cold, a blade cutting through the room.
"Dorian."
"Explain yourself." I froze. I didn't understand. A surge of unease rose inside me, pressing against my ribs. My eyes darted toward my father, waiting, begging for him to speak. He only lowered his head, shame flooding the space between us. Before I could make sense of it, Susan's voice broke in, trembling, desperate. "Will, there must be some misunderstanding. This is the family's house." But Grandpa didn't look at her. He looked at me, and in his eyes I knew a secret was about to bleed out into the open. My name is Dorian Marston, and this is not just a memory. It's the story of how I lived years swallowed by injustice, pushed aside by the very people who were supposed to protect me. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong anywhere, like you were a stranger in your own home, maybe you'll understand. And if you haven't, I still need you to hear this. This is the story of a boy marked by scars no one could see, and how he searched for light in the thickest darkness. I was born in a small town in Ohio, the kind where autumn painted the streets gold and neighbors knew each other's names. But in my family, warmth was scarce. My mother, Diana, died giving birth to me. Complications. I never understood the details. All I knew was that she was the one light I never got to meet. My father, Gregory, was a stern man. He looked at me as if my very existence was a wound that refused to close. When I was 3, he remarried. Susan entered our lives, a woman with a smile that never warmed and eyes that calculated every move. Not long after, she gave birth to Benjamin.
Ben.
The golden boy. Ben became the son my father and Susan orbited around. To my father, he was the pride and the future of our name. To Susan, he was everything, her treasure, her mission, her crown jewel. And me? I was the shadow in the corner, the unwanted child who carried the wrong blood. Even as a child, I felt it. When I was 5, I watched from the living room corner as Ben tore open the box of a shiny remote-controlled car, the kind every boy dreamed about. My gift that year? A scratched-up plastic car with wheels that barely turned. Good enough for you, my father had said. Susan chimed in. Ben needs new things to develop his intellect. The words burned even though they were said casually, like I didn't deserve anything more. When I brought home perfect grades, my father barely looked at me. Not bad, he'd say. Don't get complacent. But when Ben managed AC, the entire house erupted in celebration. You'd think he had just discovered fire. I wasn't jealous. Not really. I didn't want his toys or his attention. I just wanted to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be loved once. But every day reminded me I wasn't enough. Susan's words echoed like a mantra meant to break me. Why can't you be more like Ben? Or worse, you should be grateful to live in this house. Grateful. As though my place under their roof was charity, not birthright. Our family wasn't poor. My father managed at a local insurance firm. Susan stayed home, pouring all her energy into grooming Ben as if he were royalty. I was reminded constantly that I was lucky to be there at all. Lucky. Yet the walls of that house never felt like mine. My room was in the attic, a cramped space with a sagging bed and a small window that stared out into an alley no one cared about. Meanwhile, Ben's room was a kingdom. Toys stacked high, posters of rock bands plastered across wide walls. Once, I asked my father why I couldn't move into one of the rooms downstairs. His face turned stone. Don't ask for too much, Dorian. Know your place. Those words became the script of my childhood. My place. A reminder, over and over, that I was an afterthought in my own family. Still, I learned to survive. I taught myself to smile, to pretend I was fine. But inside, a storm raged. A quiet rebellion. I told myself that one day, I would escape this house. I would break the chains they wrapped around me. I would prove that I was not the useless, unwanted boy they believed I was. At 18, I graduated high school with solid grades. No one noticed. No one cared. But that night, standing in my attic room, diploma in hand, I promised myself, this would not be the end of my story. I always dreamed of college. I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to build something solid, something real. More than anything, I wanted to make Grandpa proud, the only person who ever looked at me with belief in his eyes. But that dream didn't last long. One night, I gathered the courage to ask my father about scholarships, about loans, about anything that could help me take that step. He didn't even hesitate. He looked at me with those cold, hollow eyes. Dorian, we don't have the money. Ben needs to be prioritized. He has potential. We have to invest in him. The words landed like a hammer. My chest tightened. My legs felt like they would give way. Then, the same brother who spent his days glued to video games, drifting with friends, aimless, was the one chosen to fulfill his potential. I didn't argue.
I didn't cry.
I just nodded, turned, and walked away. That night, lying on my old bed in the attic, staring at the cracked ceiling, I whispered a vow to myself. If my father wouldn't believe in me, I would believe in me. If they wouldn't build me up, I'd climb on my own. I took a job at Walmart. First a cashier, then in the stockroom. Long nights. Endless holidays behind a counter. Customers who tested my patience at every turn. I was exhausted. But I endured. Every dollar was a brick in the escape I was building. Eventually, I rented my own apartment. It was small, worn down. The walls stained yellow, the faucet dripping at all hours. But it was mine. My space. A place where Susan's sneers and my father's disappointed glares couldn't reach me. Meanwhile, Ben lived a different life. He went to a private school. He drove a shiny new car, a gift from our father. He never worked a single day. One evening, Susan walked into the Walmart where I worked. She saw me behind the cashier counter. Her lips curled into that familiar, sharp smirk. "Dorian, this is what you're doing? Such a shame. Ben will never have to lower himself like this." I forced a smile. My jaw ached from holding back the scream that burned inside me. Why him? Why always him? Why wasn't I worthy of the same chances? Those years were heavy with loneliness. I had no close friends. I was always working, always saving, always surviving. But I wasn't completely alone.
There was Grandpa.
He was my anchor. From Chicago, between his projects and deadlines, he'd call me whenever he could. Those calls were my lifeline. He'd tell me about the buildings he was raising from steel and stone. He'd ask about my life. And always, before hanging up, he'd say, "Dorian, you're strong. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I never told him the truth about my father or Susan. I didn't want to burden him. And deep down, I feared that if I admitted my pain, he might see me as weak. Grandpa was the one who spoke of my mother. He told me Diana was gentle. She loved books. She believed in fairness. He confessed that he still blamed himself for not being there when she gave birth. That work had kept him away. His voice would falter when he said it. If I had been there, maybe things would have been different. I never blamed him. I just wished I had met her, even once, to know I had been loved. The years passed. I became self-reliant. I fixed leaky pipes. I taught myself to cook simple meals. I learned to quiet the ache in my chest. But the emptiness never left me. That hollow space of not truly belonging, of growing up without a real family. I didn't know then that my father and Susan were hiding something. A secret big enough to shatter everything I thought I knew. At 21, I was still in that cramped apartment on the south side of town, working night shifts at the supermarket. My days blurred into the same routine, mornings that felt empty, meals I barely tasted, sleep always cut short. But at least I had something that was mine. Freedom. A fragile sense of dignity, paid for by endurance. Then one afternoon, while running employee checkout, my phone buzzed. A text. From Susan. "Come to the new house tonight. Address. 1432 Hollow Creek."
Small party.
I stared at the screen, reading it over and over as if the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. New house? I'd heard nothing about them moving.
No mention. No invitation.
And certainly, no one had asked if I wanted to live with them. Part of me wanted to delete the message, to act like it never came. But another part, some quiet, stubborn corner of my heart, told me to go. Maybe this was my chance. Maybe we could reconnect. Even if it was just a polite evening, I wanted to stand there and show them that I wasn't the sullen boy in the attic anymore. I had changed. Maybe, just maybe, they had too. I stopped at a liquor store near work, picked up a bottle of affordable red wine. Then I went to a small embroidery shop to collect the gift I'd ordered, a handkerchief with the initials GM stitched into the corner. It wasn't much, but it was thoughtful. It carried meaning. The new house was on the west side, a neighborhood I'd never stepped into before. As I drove down streets lined with young maple trees and manicured lawns, I felt like I was trespassing in another world. Two-story homes stood side by side, elegant and precise. Wooden doors, gray roofs, red brick steps, everything polished, everything new. Finally, I stopped in front of the address Susan had sent. A cream-colored house with arched windows, a broad porch, and a stone-stepped yard. It looked like something pulled from a magazine. I stepped out of my car, bottle in one hand, gift in the other. For a moment, I just stood there on the porch, staring at the door. My chest was tight. My pulse quickened. I didn't know what I would find inside. But I knew this night would matter. For reasons I couldn't explain, my heart was hammering before I even touched the door. It wasn't excitement. It was something darker. A pressure deep in my chest, like I was about to cross a threshold into a life that didn't belong to me. Susan opened the door. She wore a silk dress that shimmered under the warm light. Her makeup was flawless, layered with care, but her smile, thin, rehearsed, barely touched her eyes. "Oh, Dorian."
Come in.
I stepped inside. The house radiated wealth, every corner polished and intentional. Wooden floors gleamed under the chandelier. A granite fireplace commanded the room, beige armchairs neatly arranged as though no one had ever dared to sit in them. On the walls, family photos already hung in perfect frames. My father and Susan smiling at their wedding. Ben clutching a sports trophy, triumphant. But none of me. Not one picture. I wasn't surprised. In the kitchen, my father stood in a crisp white shirt, twisting open a bottle of wine. He looked at me, gave a single nod.
Oh.
"You're here."
No items. No welcome.
I handed him the bottle of wine and the small gift I'd brought. "Congratulations on the new house, Dad." He took them without looking, set them down on the counter, and turned away. The party wasn't really a celebration. A handful of people filled the living room, new neighbors, an older couple, one of my father's colleagues. They spoke animatedly about mortgages, property values, backyard pools. I sat in the corner, invisible, a glass of water in my hand while they raised their glasses of wine. Susan's voice floated across the room. "We searched forever to find this place. We were so lucky to close before prices jumped. Gregory has such an eye for houses." My father smiled at the praise. He didn't correct her. He didn't admit whose eye had really found this home. I tried to smile, too. Tried to convince myself I was happy for them. Not for the granite or the chandeliers, but because I thought maybe they'd finally found something to fill their emptiness. I didn't know then that I was congratulating them for stealing what had been meant for me. That night, I returned to my little apartment. I reached for my phone to text Grandpa, to tell him I'd survived the evening. But I stopped. He was busy, always busy. And he was getting older. I didn't want to trouble him. I set the phone down, lay back, stared at the cracked ceiling until sleep pulled me under. I had no idea the truth was lying just beneath me, like a bomb waiting for its fuse. After that housewarming, life slid back into its usual rhythm, or what passed for rhythm in my world. Nobody mentioned the new house again. Nobody asked me what I thought of it. Nobody asked if I wanted to live there. But something began to shift. Subtle at first. Strange. From that point on, every holiday came with an invitation. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Ben's birthday, even my father and Susan's anniversary. Always the same type of message. Curt, impersonal. 6 p.m. Come for dinner. Ben's looking forward to seeing you. We have guests. Be on time. I went. Not because I believed they had changed, but because I still believed in duty. In the faint, desperate obligation of being a son. Every time, I carried a small gift. Chosen with care. Wrapped by hand. And every time, my gift was placed aside, unopened, unacknowledged. And then came the strangest thing of all. They started pulling me into family photos. The first time was Christmas. Susan called out, "Dorian, come stand closer to Ben. We're taking a family picture." I froze, but I stepped forward. My father stood tall in the center, his arm draped over Ben's shoulders. I lingered at the edge, forcing a smile. When the camera clicked, it felt like a play staged for strangers, and I was the extra added to balance the frame. After that, it became routine. Every gathering, they pulled me in. Sometimes the whole family. Sometimes just my father and me. Once, Susan even placed her hand on my shoulder and smiled brightly, as though we had always been close. I didn't understand it. My face had never hung on the walls of the old house. I had been erased from every memory. So why now? Why this sudden performance? I asked once, casually, after Ben's birthday dinner. Why so many family photos all of a sudden? Susan laughed lightly, waving it off. We just want to capture memories. You're part of the family too, aren't you? I nodded. But the weight in my chest grew heavier. I wasn't naive. Something was off. I couldn't name it, but I felt it. Like I was being arranged, molded into a frame that wasn't mine. Cast as the dutiful son in pictures that weren't meant for me, staged for reasons I couldn't see. And then, on Christmas, when I was 23, the curtain finally tore. The day was bitterly cold. I had finished a shift at work, sipping cheap coffee in my apartment, debating whether to arrive late like always. My plan was simple: show up, smile, eat a little, pose for a few photos, and leave. Then my phone rang. Grandpa's name lit the screen. Dorian, come over right now. I'm at your new house. 1432 Hollow Creek. I wanted to surprise you. I froze. My breath caught. Grandpa was here? In Ohio? He almost never left Chicago. His construction empire kept him chained there. I threw on my jacket and rushed out the door, my mind spiraling. Why hadn't he told me? And why was he at my father's house? When I pulled up, the house glowed under strings of Christmas lights. A wreath hung on the door. The Christmas tree shimmered through the window. It looked like a postcard. I knocked, heart pounding against my ribs. The door opened. Susan stood there, her smile faltering the moment she saw me. Dorian, what are you? Susan's voice trailed off, her eyes flicking past me toward the living room. And then I heard it, that familiar voice. Dorian, come in, my boy.
Grandpa.
I stepped forward, and there he was, standing tall under the chandelier. His silver hair gleamed in the golden light, his frame still strong, commanding, like a man who had spent a lifetime building his world brick by brick. His presence filled the room. He wrapped me in a hug. Firm.
Tight.
Not just affection, but urgency. Excitement wrapped in something heavier, something unspoken. I wanted to surprise the whole family, he said, glancing around with a proud smile. This house, it's wonderful, isn't it? Are you happy living here? The words froze me in place. My throat tightened. I hesitated, every instinct screaming that this moment wasn't safe. I don't live here, Grandpa. I just visit. The room shifted instantly. His smile vanished. His eyes sharpened, narrowing as they cut from me to my father. My father stood near the fireplace, a glass of wine in hand, suddenly smaller under Grandpa's gaze. Susan jumped in fast, her voice coated in sugar. Will, there must be some kind of misunderstanding. Dorian likes living independently, don't you, dear? Her eyes locked on mine, commanding me to nod. But Grandpa wasn't looking at her. His gaze stayed on me, steady and sharp. His voice dropped lower, colder.
Dorian.
Tell me the truth. You don't live here? The weight of the room pressed down on me. I took a deep breath.
No.
I live in a rented apartment. South side of town. I cover the rent with my supermarket wages. Silence. It was suffocating. Like the air itself had been drained from the room. My father lowered his head, gripping his glass tighter. Susan tried to speak again, her voice trembling. Will, we thought it was best for Dorian. He wanted independence. And Ben needs space. Enough. Grandpa's voice sliced through her words like a blade. Gregory, explain yourself. 2 years ago, I sent you $400,000. I told you to buy a 3-bedroom house in this neighborhood. A gift. For Dorian. I was crystal clear. That house was for him. So why, his voice thundered now, why is he rotting in a rundown apartment while you live here? My father's face drained white. He said nothing. Susan's lips parted, but no sound came out. My mind reeled. A house? For me? $400,000? I turned to Grandpa, searching his face for some clue that this was a mistake. Then to my father, waiting for him to deny it, to tell me I'd misunderstood. But no words came. Finally, my father set his glass down, his voice shaky, clinging to composure. I thought the house would be better used by all of us. Dorian's independent. He doesn't need a place this big. Ben's young. He needs an environment to grow, to study. Doesn't need, Grandpa roared, stepping closer, his fury rattling the air. You dare say he doesn't need it? Dorian, my grandson, Diana's son, he's barely scraping by, and you tell me he doesn't deserve the very gift I entrusted you with. His eyes burned. What did you do, Gregory? You put the deed in your own name, didn't you? My father's shoulders sagged. He couldn't meet his father-in-law's eyes. He trembled in silence. Susan found her voice, desperate. Will, you don't understand. Dorian isn't my biological son. Ben is the future of this family. Dorian, he doesn't deserve. Shut up. Grandpa's roar shook the walls. His anger thundered through the room. Doesn't deserve? Dorian is my blood. My daughter's son. My grandson. I trusted you, Gregory. I gave you everything so you could protect him. And what did you do? You stole from him. You tricked me with these staged photos. His finger stabbed toward the framed family picture on the wall, the one where I stood stiff, awkward, at the edge of the frame. I thought he lived here. I believed the smiles in those photos.
But it was all a lie.
All to cover your greed. My chest burned. The photos. The endless invitations. The staged smiles. It all clicked into place.
None of it had been about me. It was all theater for Grandpa.
I looked at my father.
I wanted him to say something.
To look me in the eye. To admit what he'd done. To apologize. But he stayed silent, head bowed, eyes down. Grandpa turned to me, his voice softer but still iron.
Dorian.
Go get your things. You're coming with me. To Chicago. This house will be yours, as I intended. And Gregory, his jaw clenched. I'll be speaking to my lawyer. You'll answer for this. Susan broke into sobs. Crocodile tears. Loud and hollow. My father finally spoke, his voice cracked, broken. Dorian, I only wanted what was best for the family. Best for the family? My voice was calm, cold. You never once saw me as part of this family. I spent my life trying to earn your pride. But all you ever saw was Ben. You stole from me. And you didn't even bother to tell me the truth. I couldn't look at him anymore. I turned away. Grandpa's hand pressed firmly onto my shoulder. His grip carried both sorrow and resolve. Let's go, Dorian. You don't need to stay here another minute. The door opened. The icy Christmas air bit my skin as we stepped outside. Behind me, the house glowed warm with lights. The house that should have been mine. Street lamps lit the snow-covered road, their glow dim and yellow. My breath rose in sharp clouds as I followed Grandpa to the black SUV parked at the curb. The driver, dressed in a sharp suit, stepped out and opened the back door. To the hotel first, Grandpa said, his voice low but unshakable. I slid into the leather seat beside him. The door shut, sealing me inside. It felt like crossing a line I could never return from, a shift into a world I never believed I belonged to. Are you okay, Dorian? Grandpa's voice was soft, but his eyes, sharp, searching, cut deeper than words. He wasn't just asking. He was peeling back my silence, trying to read every thought I was too afraid to say. I swallowed, my throat dry. I don't know, Grandpa. Everything's happening so fast. I can't even process it. My voice cracked, hollow from exhaustion. He placed a steady hand on my knee, grounding me. I know, but listen to me. From this moment forward, things will be different. You're coming to Chicago with me. We'll start fresh. Just the two of us. I turned toward the window. Christmas lights flickered past in streaks of color, blurring like faint sparks against the darkness. My reflection looked back at me, tired, small, but carrying the faintest glimmer of hope. Chicago, the city I had only heard about in Grandpa's stories. The city where he built his empire, brick by brick, from nothing. I had never set foot there. I had never imagined I'd belong there. Yet somehow, that was where my life was about to begin again. A second chance. A way out of the shadows I'd lived under my whole life. The next morning came too soon. We boarded an early flight, the sky still gray with dawn. I sat by the window, watching the endless expanse of snow-dusted fields roll by beneath us. Each mile we left behind felt like shedding an old skin, leaving behind a world that had never wanted me. Grandpa sat beside me, calm as ever, buried in a business newspaper. Every so often, he lowered it, stealing a glance at me with a faint smile that said more than words. Encouragement. Reassurance. When the plane touched down at O'Hare, the cold Chicago wind slammed against us the moment we stepped outside. It was sharp, biting, different from the Ohio cold. This was a wind that belonged to a city alive with power. James, Grandpa's driver, waited by the familiar black SUV. He nodded respectfully, then whisked us away through streets lined with steel and glass that rose higher than I'd ever seen. Skyscrapers towered above us, reflecting the winter sun like frozen giants. Ohio, with its modest homes and narrow streets, felt like another universe now. We drove through neighborhoods that shifted from busy urban blocks to quiet, tree-lined avenues. Finally, the car slowed before an iron gate that loomed high and regal. Beyond it, a long driveway curved toward a mansion that looked like something from another lifetime. Stone pillars, perfectly trimmed lawns, even rose bushes in bloom, defiantly red against the snow. My jaw fell open. My voice shook. This is your house, Grandpa? He laughed, clapping me on the shoulder with a warmth that cut through the cold. Welcome home, Dorian. This isn't just my house anymore. It's yours too. The front doors swung open into a world I didn't know existed outside of movies. A grand foyer stretched before me, marble floors polished to a mirror shine. A spiral staircase wound upward like something from a palace. Abstract paintings adorned the walls, each one carrying weight and meaning I couldn't grasp. The living room itself was larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a winter garden with a pool shimmering under the pale light. Even the air smelled different. Pine, leather, a hint of fresh polish. It felt less like a house and more like stepping into another world. I clutched my small, worn bag tighter against my chest. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Grandpa replied, guiding me upstairs. He stopped at a door and opened it wide. This is yours. Inside was a bedroom I couldn't have dared to dream of. A king-size bed dressed in soft linens. A walnut desk with a brand-new laptop waiting. A thick rug spread across the floor. The window opened to a view of the garden below, glowing under the snow. This is where you start over. No wait.
No burdens.
Just a clean slate. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking beneath me, still holding onto my old life in the form of that single bag. Only hours before, I'd been in a dingy apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. Now I was here, but awe couldn't fully silence the ache gnawing at me. That house in Ohio, the one meant to be mine, still burned in the back of my mind like a wound that refused to heal. That evening, Grandpa took me into the city. We sat tucked away in a quiet corner of a restaurant so refined it felt intimidating. Candlelight flickered across our table, catching the edges of the glassware. He ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than a month's wages at the supermarket. I lifted the glass, took one careful sip, then set it down. The taste of luxury was foreign, almost bitter. Grandpa's face shifted. His eyes darkened. His voice lowered. Dorian, we need to talk. About your father. About the house. About everything. My chest tightened. I nodded, bracing myself. 2 years ago, he began slowly, I sent Gregory $400,000. I told him to buy a house in Hollow Creek. It was a gift. For you. A foundation. A future. I couldn't be there to oversee it, so I trusted him to do it. I trusted him.
He paused.
His jaw clenched, anger flaring in his eyes. But I was wrong. The truth cut deeper than I expected. My fists curled under the table. So, Dad just kept the house for himself. Grandpa shook his head. It's worse than that. His voice grew thick, bitter. Since you were a child, I've been sending Gregory money. Not just for the house. Every year. For your school. For your clothes. For anything you needed to grow with dignity. To give you a chance. I thought he was taking care of you the way I asked him to. But when you told me about your tiny apartment, about the supermarket, I realized the truth. He kept it all. For himself. For his wife. For Ben.
It hit me like a blow to the chest.
School fees.
Clothes.
All the things I never had. The endless years of hand-me-downs, of skipping meals, of working night shifts until my body gave out. All of it unnecessary. My father had stolen not just money, but opportunities. My life could have been different. I didn't know. I whispered, my throat tight. I never knew about any of that money. Dad never told me. I thought we were broke. I thought it was up to me to survive. Grandpa slammed his hand against the table, the glasses rattling violently. His voice thundered low, feral. That bastard. I trusted him. I trusted him with you. And he betrayed me. He betrayed your mother. The sound of her name, Diana, stabbed through me. My chest burned. My eyes blurred. I had never met her. She'd been gone before I could remember. But through Grandpa's stories, she lived in fragments, her gentleness, her dreams for me, the life she wanted me to have. And now I realized she too had been betrayed. The thought of my father stealing what was meant for me, what my mother and Grandpa had dreamed for me, ignited a fire in my chest. It wasn't just anger. It was betrayal. It was the weight of every lonely night, every empty pocket, every mocking word Susan had thrown at me. What are you going to do, Grandpa? My voice was low, cautious, but inside, I already knew part of his answer. His eyes narrowed, cold as steel. I'm going to sue Gregory. I'll make sure that house is transferred into your name. And after that, I'll cut him off completely. No more money. Not a single cent. The words hung heavy between us. I stared at the flickering candlelight on the table, silent.
A part of me wanted that.
To see my father crushed beneath the weight of justice. To watch him face the consequences he had dodged for so long. But another part, the part that had grown up tired, worn from carrying resentment like chains, just wanted peace. Grandpa, my voice softened, steady but firm. Don't sue him.
Please.
I know you're angry. I am too. But it's done. It's over. I don't want my new life here to drown in courtrooms and fights. Cutting him off, that's enough. Let him feel the emptiness without your support. Let that be his punishment. I just want to start fresh. With you. He searched my face. His eyes softened, though behind them I still saw the storm. Are you certain, Dorian? That house was meant to be yours. You have every right to claim it. I'm sure, I whispered. The house doesn't matter anymore. My future does. I don't want to live trying to fix the past. He studied me for a long moment, then placed his hand on my shoulder. His voice broke with pride. You're stronger than I thought. Your mother, she would be proud of you. The weeks that followed in Chicago felt like learning to breathe for the first time. I wasn't just moving into a mansion. I was moving into a new version of myself. Grandpa gave me more than a roof. He gave me the space to rediscover who I was without shame, without fear. He took me to his company, a tall glass tower in the heart of downtown Chicago. Inside, the offices buzzed with life. Phones ringing. Engineers bent over blueprints. Laughter breaking through the noise of industry. This, Grandpa said, introducing me with pride, is my grandson, Dorian. For the first time, I felt seen. Not as a burden. Not as an afterthought. But as someone who mattered. One afternoon, Standing with him at a suburban construction site, I felt the wind whip against my face as I watched workers pour concrete and cranes swing steel into place. Grandpa turned to me. Would you like to try working here? Not big responsibilities right away. Just small projects. Learn as you go. I hesitated. Construction was foreign to me. Blueprints, measurements, deadlines. All things I'd never imagined myself handling. But then I saw the trust in his eyes, the same trust I'd longed for my entire life. I'll try, Grandpa, I said quietly. I can't promise I'll be good at it. Not right away. He laughed, the sound warm and strong. No one's good at the start, but you have heart. You have determination. That's worth more than skill. I started small, in the planning department, filing documents, tracking progress, shadowing project managers. The work was tough, demanding. But with every day, I learned. I studied blueprints until the lines started to make sense. I sat in meetings, taking notes until my hand cramped, and slowly, I began to offer ideas. At first, my colleagues saw me only as the boss's grandson. But as weeks passed, they noticed something else. I stayed late. I worked hard. I asked questions instead of pretending I knew answers. Respect grew. Not because of my name, but because of my effort. Outside of work, I explored Chicago like a man set free. I wandered down crowded streets lit with neon and energy. I stood in front of paintings in quiet museums. I spent hours in coffee shops with a book in my hand, finally tasting what it meant to have time to dream. For the first time in my life, I could breathe. I could imagine myself becoming someone new. But scars don't fade quickly. Some nights, lying in my new bed with its warm blankets and silence, I dreamed of my old apartment. The leaking faucet, Susan's mocking laugh, my father's cold stare. I woke wondering if I deserved this new life. Or if it would all vanish like smoke. Grandpa noticed. He always noticed. One evening, as the fire crackled between us, he placed an old frame in my hands. Inside was a photograph of a woman I had never known but always longed for, my mother, Diana. Her smile was radiant, her arms cradling a small dog. She looked happy.
Alive. Whole.
She wanted you to be happy, Grandpa said softly. His voice broke. I failed her once. I wasn't there when she needed me. But I won't fail you. Not again. I held the frame tightly, my vision blurring with tears. I wish I could have met her, I whispered. You're more like her than you realize, he said, his gaze fixed on me. She was strong, but gentle. You carry her heart. The words washed over me like healing. For the first time, I felt a piece of the mother I never knew living inside me. That night, I began writing in a journal.
Thoughts. Fears.
Hopes. The pages became my mirror, my confession, my way of confronting the past instead of running from it. 3 months later, a letter arrived. The envelope bore no name, but the handwriting made my stomach twist. My father's. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a single page, the ink shaky, uneven. Dorian, I know I have no right to write this. What I've done is unforgivable. I was wrong to keep the house. Wrong to keep the money your grandfather sent. Losing your mother broke me, and I became a terrible father. I don't expect forgiveness, but I regret it.
Susan and Ben are gone.
I'm transferring the house to you, as your grandfather wanted. I hope one day you can look at me without disappointment. Gregory. I read the words once, then again, then a third time. My chest felt torn open. Anger.
Pain.
And somewhere buried beneath it all, a faint flicker of relief. Could I forgive him? I didn't know. Years of abandonment and cruelty couldn't be erased by a single page. But I also knew I didn't want to carry resentment forever. I showed the letter to Grandpa. He read it slowly, his face unreadable. Finally, he set it down. It's your decision, Dorian. If you want the house, I'll stand beside you. If not, I'll respect your choice. I thought of Hollow Creek. The house with its green lawn, its fireplace glowing in the winters. Once it had been my dream. Now, I didn't need it to feel worthy. I don't want the house, Grandpa, I said, my voice steady, certain. I want to sell it. Use the money for college. I want to become an engineer, the way I always dreamed. For a moment, he just looked at me. Then his lips curved into a smile, pride lighting his eyes like fire catching in dry wood. That's my grandson. Not long after, I was walking across the campus of a university in Chicago, officially enrolled as a civil engineering major. A dream once buried, now alive. The money from selling the Hollow Creek house, combined with Grandpa's unwavering support, made it possible. For years, I thought higher education belonged to other people, kids with perfect families, parents who believed in them, money that flowed easily. Not me. Never me. But now, here I was. The first days weren't easy. I sat in classrooms filled with students younger than me, their faces fresh, their confidence loud. I felt older, behind, carrying more shadows than anyone else in the room. The textbooks were heavy, the concepts foreign, and some nights I studied until dawn, red-eyed and exhausted. But I didn't quit. I refused to. Every time I felt doubt clawing at me, I thought of my mother's smile in that old photograph. I thought of Grandpa's hand on my shoulder, telling me I was stronger than I believed. I thought of the promise I made to myself. My past would not define my future. Chicago gave me more than knowledge. It gave me connection. I found friends, people who didn't know the boy I used to be, who didn't measure me against ghosts. They liked me for who I was now. I joined an engineering club and there I met Emma. Smart, sharp, with a smile that could disarm anyone. She teased me endlessly for my obsessive note-taking, calling me the professor, and I found myself laughing in ways I hadn't in years. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. At home, Grandpa remained my anchor. More than family, he became my friend. We'd sit by the fireplace on quiet evenings, trading stories. He told me about my mother, about building his company from nothing, about the mistakes that shaped him. I told him about my dreams, about the life I wanted to build. The Ohio house was gone, the money safely covering my tuition. My father never called.
I didn't reach out.
Maybe one day forgiveness would come, but not yet. For now, my focus was here, on growth, on hope, on building something real.
2 years passed.
2 years since that Christmas night when the truth shattered everything. Chicago had become more than a city to me. It was home. Not because of its skyscrapers piercing the sky, not because of the noise of traffic or the smell of roasted peanuts on street corners, but because here in this place, I found myself. Now in my second year of engineering, I could see the dream forming into reality. A dream my father once crushed with excuses about money. But I had carved a new path. I had friends who stood beside me. I had a clear purpose. And for the first time, I felt something I had never dared to feel before. I deserved it. Meanwhile, back in Ohio, whispers drifted my way. Whispers of collapse. Gregory had lost his job at the insurance company. Susan no longer hosted her glittering parties. Ben, the pride of the Marston family, the golden child, had dropped out of college after only 1 semester. Their empire of comfort had crumbled, leaving only dust.
I didn't dwell on it.
The past was the past. I had learned not to let it chain me. But sometimes, the past doesn't wait for permission. Sometimes, it finds you anyway. It was late autumn. Leaves pressed against the library windows as I studied for midterms, a coffee cooling at my side. My phone buzzed. An Ohio number. Unknown. I hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end froze me. Susan. Dorian, she said, weak, trembling. Gone was the arrogance, the sharpness I remembered. She sounded like someone whose spirit had been stripped bare. I know you're busy, but I need to talk to you. About the family. Family. The word landed like ice in my chest. Coming from her, it felt foreign. What's going on? I asked, my voice colder than I meant it to be. We're in trouble, she whispered. Real trouble. And I thought, maybe you could help. I let her speak. She told me everything, her words a fragile mix of desperation and clinging pride. After Grandpa cut them off, Gregory had lost his job, drowning in failure. Susan, unskilled and unprepared, couldn't find work. They had sold their possessions piece by piece to cover debts, but it wasn't enough. They no longer had the Hollow Creek house. They had moved into a cramped apartment at the edge of town, a place Susan described bitterly as unworthy of our family. And then her voice broke. Ben, he's struggling, Dorian. He's working at a fast food restaurant. But he doesn't know how to handle this kind of life. He needs help. A bitter laugh escaped me, not from amusement, but from irony.
Ben.
The boy who had everything. The one with new cars, endless toys, every comfort. The one they praised while I scraped by in silence. Now he stood where I once had, working shifts in a job I knew too well, tasting the same grind I endured at 18. A flicker of satisfaction stirred in me, but it vanished quickly, leaving only emptiness. Let me get this straight, I said, my tone calm, sharp. You're calling me for help. After everything? After Dad stole my house? After you told me I didn't deserve anything? You think I'll just forget the years you treated me like an outsider? Like a burden? There was silence. Then Susan's voice, barely a whisper. Dorian, I know we were wrong, but we're family. Ben's your brother. You can't turn your back on family. Family, I repeated, the word burning with bitterness. You and Dad never treated me like family. Dad stole the money meant for my education, meant for my life. And now you want me to help Ben, the one who always had everything while I had nothing. I took a breath, steady and final.
No, Susan.
Let Ben learn the way I did. Let him stand on his own. I don't owe you anything. And I hung up.
The phone was still warm in my hand. My heart pounded hard against my chest.
Her words echoed in my head. Family. Ben needs help. But this time, they held no power over me. Not after everything. 2 years of silence had already built the distance. Now it was a wall. Rumors drifted to me from Ohio. Quiet whispers carried by old acquaintances, fragments of a life I no longer belonged to. I never sought them out. My days were already full. Classes at the university, late nights buried in blueprints, projects at Grandpa's company, evenings walking with Emma through the chilly streets of Chicago. But still, the rumors crept in. Like cold drafts seeping under a locked door, reminders of a world I had left behind. My father, Gregory, had once carried himself with calm authority. A man who believed control was his birthright. For years, his position at the insurance company funded their comfort. Susan played the proud housewife, and Ben, the golden boy, lived in effortless abundance. Then came that Christmas night, the night Grandpa cut the cord. From there, everything began to unravel. The company hit hard times. Gregory, distracted by the storm inside his own family, lost his grip. Within 6 months, he was fired. And he never found his way back. The savings he had hoarded, money stolen from Grandpa, stolen from me, was squandered. Cars, vacations, parties. All for appearances. All for pride. When the money ran dry, so did the illusion. Susan couldn't adapt. She had built her identity on perfection, not survival. Her skills were limited to hosting soirees and browsing boutiques. When they were forced out of Hollow Creek, the house I had sold to buy my future, they landed in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. Susan called it unworthy. The place was run down. Stained walls. Leaking pipes. The kind of home I once prayed for as a child, yet she despised it. They sold everything to stay afloat. Ben's car. His collectibles. Even Susan's prized jewelry. Still, the debts kept climbing: mortgages, overdue bills, unpaid loans. And Ben, who once carried the weight of the Marston name, who was celebrated as the future of the family, collapsed under the slightest pressure. He dropped out of college after 1 semester.
Couldn't take the discipline.
Couldn't handle the responsibility. He worked at a fast food restaurant, forced into the kind of job he once mocked me for. Long shifts, impatient customers, the endless repetition of survival. He couldn't cope. Coworkers complained he was careless, slow, distracted. 3 months in, he was fired. From then on, he bounced between jobs, never lasting long enough to matter. I didn't search for these stories. They reached me anyway, passed along by Grandpa's friends, by people in town who shared their downfall as a cautionary tale. Susan was trying to sell trinkets online. Gregory had taken part-time work at an auto shop, hands blackened by grease. Pride eroded. They were living in scarcity. For the first time, they were facing what I had known all along: struggle, hunger, the grind of survival. A month after Susan's call, a letter arrived. This time from my father. It wasn't an apology. It was a plea. He wrote that they were on the edge of bankruptcy, that the rent on their apartment hadn't been paid, that eviction was closing in. Ben had spiraled. After losing his third job, he abandoned any search for work, instead drinking, drifting with bad company, causing trouble in town. The words blurred as I read them. He said they had no one else, that I was their last hope. He repeated the word family, as if saying it often enough could summon something inside me. I sat on the edge of the king-size bed in Grandpa's mansion, letter trembling in my hands. Even after 2 years, I wasn't used to this kind of comfort. And as I read, every sentence cut like glass. Memories came back sharp and raw. Nights in the attic, lying on a creaky bed, listening to silence, wondering why I wasn't loved. Every time Susan reminded me I wasn't good enough. Every moment Dad compared me to Ben, holding me up as proof of failure. And that Christmas night, the night I learned that everything I longed for, every chance I dreamed of, had been stolen by the 2 people who were supposed to protect me. I showed Grandpa the letter. He read it quietly, his eyes darkening the way they had that night 2 years ago. "What are you going to do?" he asked.
His voice steady.
He never pressured me,
Never force me.
but I knew his anger at Gregory still burned. "I'm not going to help them," I said. My voice didn't waver. They had their chance. Ben had everything I didn't: a car, a warm room, parents' love. If he has to struggle now, let him. I had to claw my way out alone. I don't owe them anything. Grandpa nodded.
Silent.
But I saw approval in his eyes. He had once threatened to sue Gregory to reclaim what was stolen. I had chosen to walk away then. And now I chose not to look back. While Gregory's family collapsed, I rose. Chicago became my ground of triumph. I aced my midterms. Emma surprised me with a small party, filling the room with laughter, warmth, and music. She wasn't just a friend anymore. She had become a constant reminder that I was enough, that I could be loved without conditions. At Grandpa's company, I was trusted with more responsibility, bigger projects, bigger risks. I even led a small construction job in the suburbs, watching buildings rise from drawings I helped bring to life. Proof that I didn't need validation from Gregory or Susan. Proof that I could build a future with my own 2 hands. And at night I began writing. Not a memoir, but a book of lessons. On resilience. On finding worth in the ruins. On turning scars into strength. I didn't know if it would ever be published. But writing it felt like stitching wounds closed. Every word, a step toward healing. One winter day, as snow swept through downtown Chicago, I saw him.
Ben.
He stood on a street corner, shivering in a thin jacket. His face was hollow, his eyes sunken. He looked older, defeated. I froze, unsure whether to approach. But he spotted me first. His eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen in years. Hope. "Dorian," he called, his voice hoarse. How are you?" I nodded, keeping distance.
"I've fine, Ben."
"You?" He gave a broken smile. The arrogance was gone. Only weariness remained. "Not great," he admitted. "Things aren't like they used to be. Can you help me? Just a little. I don't have anyone else." I looked at him. For a moment, I remembered all the times he was favored, while I was cast aside. "Ben," I said, calm, firm. "I had to stand on my own when no one reached out to me. You can too.
Get a job.
Learn responsibility. Don't look at me to fix what your family broke." And then I turned. I walked away through the snow-covered streets. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because for the first time, I had chosen myself. I sat on a splintered wooden bench outside Vanderbilt University Hospital, pressing my hands together so tightly that my knuckles blanched. The spring air was soft, heavy with the sweetness of blooming dogwoods. Sunlight glimmered against the hospital's glass facade, making it shine like a cathedral. But none of it reached me. Behind those walls, in a sterile room filled with machines, my husband, Daniel Carter, was fighting for his life against an enemy we never even knew existed. People drifted past me, their conversations light, easy. Laughter about dinner plans, kids, gardens, normal life. For a moment, I ached to trade places with them. To be just another woman living a simple afternoon, careless in the warmth of spring. But I wasn't that woman anymore. My world had shrunk to white walls, flickering monitors, and the unending rhythm of beeping machines. Daniel was once unstoppable. He was the kind of man who could spend 12 hours in his workshop shaping wood into beauty, then come home and still cook me dinner. He never forgot to ask about my day. His smile, steady, calm, always carried the weight of a promise that everything would be okay, no matter how heavy life felt. He was my anchor, my shelter. And now, watching him fade, I felt like the ground beneath me was turning to quicksand. 6 months ago, we thought we had forever. We dreamed of vacations we couldn't yet afford, a bigger house for the children we still hoped for, maybe even a dog. Then one night Daniel came home pale, his body exhausted in a way he couldn't explain. He brushed it off as just another long day. But the fatigue grew. It settled deep, carving him hollow. Then came the bruises. Nights when he couldn't breathe. The doctor's words were surreal, impossible to absorb. Autoimmune aplastic anemia. His own body destroying its marrow, shutting down the very place where blood was born. Without a stem cell transplant, there was little chance. I stayed strong in front of him, squeezing his hand, whispering promises we both wanted to believe. We'll get through this. But every night, I broke alone, on the bathroom floor, pressing a towel to my mouth to muffle my sobs. Because I carried a truth Daniel didn't. He had no family. No parents, no siblings. He had grown up drifting through foster care, never knowing where he belonged. And without relatives, the odds of finding a donor were slim to none. We registered, we waited, we prayed. But the doctors were honest. Matches could take months, even years. Daniel didn't have that kind of time. Earlier today, his doctor pulled me aside. His voice low, heavy with a compassion that felt like pity. Emily, we are running out of options. If we don't find a compatible donor soon, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. I sat there in that hallway, tears running unchecked, feeling utterly useless. I was a nurse. My whole life had been about healing others. But here I was, powerless, unable to save the man I loved most. My thoughts circled back to our little wooden house at the edge of Nashville. The rocking chair he built me for our first anniversary. The note he framed by the kitchen door, written in his careful hand. You are my always. The thought of losing him sliced through me. Yet beneath the desperation, a colder voice whispered, prepare yourself. I hated it, but grief had already started wrapping its icy hands around my heart. And then, because life can be cruel in ways you don't see coming, I overheard something. A conversation that would change everything. But before I get there, I think back to the night I first met Daniel, a night that felt ordinary, yet turned my whole world. I had just finished my final nursing exam, drained but free, and my friends dragged me to a small cafe downtown. It wasn't fancy. An old brick building, creaky wooden floors, and the smell of roasted coffee hanging heavy in the air. I remember it vividly. Daniel walked in with a paper bag from the hardware store, his jeans dusty, his hands calloused from work. He carried himself with this quiet confidence, the kind that makes you stop and look twice. Our eyes met. He smiled, shy but steady, and asked if the seat across from me was taken. We talked for hours. About nothing. About everything. His love for building furniture. My hopes for pediatrics. Our mutual hatred of olives. Our shared obsession with peach cobbler. When he laughed, really laughed, his eyes crinkled in the corners.
Something in me shifted that night.
I just knew. From then on, Daniel became a constant. He showed up with small tokens, wildflowers wrapped in butcher paper, honey from a roadside stand, a book I'd once mentioned in passing. He turned the ordinary into something magical. 2 years later, we stood beneath a sprawling oak tree exchanging vows. I wore my mother's pearl earrings. Daniel cried when he saw me walking toward him. He never believed in hiding emotion. His love was something he wore openly, without shame. We moved into that wooden fixer-upper outside town, the one he swore he could handle. He was right. He sanded floors, built shelves, carved a rocking chair with his hands as a gift for me. That chair still sits on our porch, a silent witness to years of us swaying side by side, watching fireflies rise in the Tennessee dusk. Life wasn't perfect, but it was full. The only thing missing was children. We tried, hoping it would happen easily. But month after month, nothing. Doctors said my body wasn't cooperating, that maybe it never would. And that was the first shadow on our perfect little life, that we tried everything. Treatments. Hormone shots. Endless appointments that blurred together in waiting rooms that smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Eventually, IVF. We walked into it with shaky hope, holding hands, daring to dream. The first attempt failed. Then the second. Each time, I stared at the single line on the test, my chest hollowing out. With every failure, I felt myself fracture. My body had betrayed us, betrayed him. But Daniel never once let me drown in blame. On those nights when I cried until my temples throbbed, he gathered me into his arms, whispering in that steady voice of his, "Emily, this doesn't change how much I love you." He meant it. I could feel the truth in every word. He even talked about adoption with a kind of quiet excitement. How many children out there needed homes? How we could still be a family. I wanted to share his joy, wanted to fully believe that love was enough. But deep down, a part of me still longed for a child with his blue eyes and that crooked half-smile he gave when he tried not to laugh. One day, after another failed cycle, I collapsed into his chest, the words spilling out through sobs. "You deserve a wife who can give you a family." He lifted my chin, made me meet his eyes. "Emily, I didn't marry you for children. I married you for you. You are my family." That was Daniel. Steadfast, gentle, unwavering in love. He could have chosen resentment, silence, distance. But instead, he chose me. Every single time. Looking back now, I see how those years of loss and disappointment carved out the shape of us. Those nights we held onto each other through heartbreak became the blueprint for weathering storms far darker than we could imagine. Because when Daniel fell ill, the foundation of our lives cracked. And still, even in weakness, he tried to be the strong one. He joked about hospital food, teased me for worrying too much, and told me we'd get through this the way we always had together. But in my heart, I knew this wasn't the same. This wasn't a battle we could outlast with love and stubbornness. This was life and death. It began so quietly we barely noticed. Daniel started coming home early, brushing off his fatigue with a lopsided smile.
Just eminência.
Long day. But the tiredness never left. It deepened. His body seemed to carry a weight only he could feel. Then came the bruises, purple blotches blooming across his skin without reason. At first small, then multiplying, marking him like shadows under his flesh. One night, I woke to the sound of him gasping. His body arched, desperate for breath, clutching his chest as if his lungs had betrayed him. The nurse in me knew something was wrong. I begged him to see a doctor. When he finally agreed, I still clung to denial. I told myself it would be simple. Vitamins. Stress. Something we could fix. Instead, we sat across from a hematology specialist, every test imaginable already behind us. I'll never forget the doctor's face. Too serious. Too deliberate. His words cut through me like glass. "Daniel, you have aplastic anemia. It's rare. And in your case, severe. Your bone marrow is shutting down." My breath caught. Daniel nodded, calm as always, and asked the only question that mattered. What do we do? The answer was devastating in its simplicity: a bone marrow transplant. Without it, his body couldn't make blood cells. Without it, there was no future. But transplants required a donor. A match. Ideally a sibling. I looked at him, silently begging for some name, some hidden family. But I already knew. Daniel had no one.
No parents. No siblings.
His life had begun in foster homes, shuffled from one place to another, roots never allowed to grow. His family tree was blank. We signed onto the National Donor Registry. Hope balanced on the thinnest thread. The doctors didn't sugarcoat it. Matches could take months, years. And Daniel didn't have that kind of time. The illness moved fast. Too fast. He turned pale, his strong hands trembling when he tried to lift a glass. The man who once built tables and chairs until midnight now struggled just across the living room. And still, he shielded me, joking about how he'd always wanted to try the bald look once his hair started thinning, teasing about hospital gowns as though they were a fashion statement. But at night, when he thought I was asleep, I'd hear him whispering prayers into the darkness. Not for himself. For me. He was asking for strength to leave me something I could hold on to. I would sit by his hospital bed, force a smile, tell him we were going to beat this. But inside, terror hollowed me out. I couldn't imagine a world without him. I couldn't imagine walking into our house and finding only silence waiting. Then came the words I feared most. Another afternoon. Another transfusion. Another doctor pulling me aside, voice heavy with finality. Emily, we are running out of options. If a match doesn't come through soon, I'm afraid. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I nodded, eyes burning, my throat too tight to speak. I had seen death before. Nurses see it more than most. But nothing had prepared me for the thought of losing Daniel. I stumbled outside, desperate for air, desperate for anything to hold me upright. The courtyard smelled of earth and sunlight. And that's when I heard it. 2 hospital employees on break, their voices casual, drifting over the hum of traffic. You know that guy in ICU? Carter? He looks just like this guy out in Pine Hollow. I swear, it's like looking at the same person. My heart stilled. Pine Hollow. A small mountain town. Just a couple of hours away. Could it be coincidence? Or could it mean something far more? Family Daniel never knew he had? For the first time in weeks, something fragile flickered inside me. A trembling, dangerous thing I had nearly forgotten. Hope. I stood frozen in that courtyard, their words echoing, clinging to me like a lifeline. He looks just like this guy who lives out in Pine Hollow. Those words wouldn't leave me. They echoed through my head on a loop, louder than the beeping machines in Daniel's room. Pine Hollow. A small mountain town 2 hours east of Nashville. I had been there once, years ago during nursing school, for a community outreach program. It was the kind of place that seemed untouched by time, where neighbors waved from porches and folks lingered long enough to ask how you were really doing. Could it be coincidence? People resembled each other, all the time. But something deep inside me refused to believe this was random. Daniel's past was a blank page. Abandoned at birth. Raised in foster care. No parents. No siblings. No history. For years he carried that emptiness quietly, though I knew it haunted him. I remembered one summer night on our porch. Fireflies blinking in the dark. Daniel holding a beer, staring off into the trees when he confessed, "Sometimes I think about finding them. My biological parents. But what if they didn't want me then? Why would they want me now?" His voice was steady but hollow, carrying a pain he never fully let me touch. I had no answer, only silence. So he buried the thought, choosing instead to believe family was something you built, not something you were born into. But now family wasn't just a dream or an ache. Family could mean survival. It could mean life or death. That night, I barely slept. I sat at Daniel's bedside, his hand fragile in mine, the machines keeping rhythm with his shallow breaths. His skin had grown pale, but his face still carried that faint, stubborn smile. I bent close and whispered, I'm going to fix this, Danny. I don't care what it takes. The next morning, I walked into work with fire in my chest. I filed for emergency leave. My supervisor didn't ask for details. She already knew enough. Instead, she hugged me tight, signed the form, and whispered, "Go." I packed quickly, shoving clothes into a bag with shaking hands. I had no map, no plan, not even a name. All I had was a rumor, a fragile thread of hope, and a photo of Daniel on my phone. Before I left, I stopped by his hospital room. He was awake, his voice weak but warm. "You look like you're about to take on the world," he teased, his lips curved in that familiar way. I kissed his forehead. "I might be." He tried to ask more, but I pressed a finger to his hand. "Don't worry about it. Just rest. I'll be back before you know it." I wanted to tell him everything, the overheard conversation, Pine Hollow, the man who might be family. But I couldn't risk planting hope in him only to crush it if it turned out to be nothing. I had to carry it alone. The drive east felt like a dream. Nashville's skyline faded into open fields, then into winding country roads lined with wildflowers just beginning to bloom. Hills rolled into one another, green and endless, until finally a wooden bridge stretched across a slow-moving creek. A weathered sign read, "Welcome to Pine Hollow." I whispered a prayer into the hum of the tires. "Please, let this be real. Let there be someone out there who can save him." I parked near the town's general store, my chest tight with nerves. Pine Hollow moved at its own rhythm. Farmers loaded feed sacks from their trucks. An elderly woman swept her porch. Children coasted down dusty streets on bicycles, their laughter carrying in the air. Every face I passed, I studied, searching, looking for Daniel's sharp jawline, his blue eyes, his crooked smile, anything. Inside the store, a man in his 50s with kind eyes stood behind the counter. I swallowed hard and pulled up Daniel's photo. "Excuse me, I'm looking for someone. I don't know his name, but people say he looks like this." The clerk studied the picture. His eyes widened.
"Yeah."
"You're probably talking about Luke Henderson. Lives out on County Road 6, near the cornfields. And yeah, he does look like that." My heart jolted. "Can you give me directions?"
He did.
I thanked him quickly and hurried back to my car. My hands trembled against the steering wheel as I drove, every mile carrying me closer to something that could either save Daniel or shatter us completely. County Road 6 was barely a road at all. Just cracked pavement winding through tall pines and open fields. A fine drizzle began to fall, mist clinging to my windshield and blurring the horizon. Then I saw it, a weather-beaten mailbox with faded white letters. Henderson. Behind it stood an old farmhouse. The walls grayed with age, surrounded by corn stubble and rutted tire tracks. A rusted swing creaked in the breeze. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, low and warning. I sat in the car, hands locked on the wheel, my pulse pounding. What if I was wrong? What if I was about to knock on a stranger's door and unravel everything? Then I thought of Daniel, his frail hand gripping mine, his smile masking the fear in his eyes. I couldn't sit still. The wooden steps moaned under my weight. I knocked softly, then harder when silence stretched. Finally, the door creaked open. A man stood there, taller than I expected, broad-shouldered but slightly stooped. His dark blonde hair fell loose across his forehead. And then the eyes. I froze.
Piercing blue.
The same shape, the same intensity. Daniel's eyes staring back at me from another face. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep, cautious, rough around the edges, like someone who didn't entertain strangers often. My hands shook as I held out my phone. This is my husband. His name is Daniel Carter. People said you look like him." The man's expression darkened. He took the phone, staring at the image far too long. His face shifted as if the ground beneath him had cracked open. First confusion. Then disbelief. Then something heavier, an ache he tried and failed to hide. He rubbed the back of his neck, staring at me like I had dragged a ghost to his front porch. "Well, I'll be damned." His voice was rough, carrying the weight of something unsaid. He looked at me again, softer now, more cautious. Who are you? My name's Emily, I whispered. I'm his wife. For a moment, silence filled the space between us. Then he stepped aside and held the door. You better come in. The house smelled faintly of coffee and motor oil. The floors creaked beneath my feet. Mismatched furniture sat in the living room, worn, but lived in, carrying the mark of a man who had built a life with his hands. He gestured toward a chair. Sit, he said, lowering himself across from me. You're saying he's your husband? I nodded, clutching my bag tight in my lap as if it might keep me steady. My voice cracked before I could stop it. He's in the hospital. Very sick. He needs a bone marrow transplant. They told us he had no family.
But then I heard about you.
I had to come. The man leaned forward, elbows braced on his knees. He looked at the photo on my phone again. His eyes narrowed, then softened as he shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. I think, his voice faltered, then steadied. I think he might be my brother. The words hit me like a blow to the chest. I could barely breathe. Your brother? He nodded, looking past me, like he was seeing something from long ago. Our mom, she wasn't much of a mother. She had a lot of kids, most with different fathers. When I was little, she had another baby.
A boy.
I remember her signing papers at the hospital. Said she wasn't keeping him. Left him there. I was too young to stop it. Too young to understand. But I never forgot. I always wondered what happened to him. He rubbed his face with both hands, his voice breaking. I didn't even know his name until now. My eyes blurred with tears. Daniel has been searching his whole life. He thought he was completely alone. Luke's jaw clenched, his entire body stiffening. Then, without hesitation, he stood. I'll do it. The transplant. I don't need to think about it. He's my brother. If there's even a chance I can help him live, of course I will. He disappeared into the kitchen and came back seconds later, keys in hand. When do we go? I sat there stunned. I had expected to beg, to plead, to explain every detail until I ran out of words. But he hadn't hesitated. It was as if some invisible thread had been pulling him to this moment all along. We left Pine Hollow that evening. The rain fell harder now, streaking across the windshield as I drove with Luke's old pickup trailing close behind. For the first time in months, my chest felt lighter. Fear was still there. Fear never left, but hope had returned. Hope that felt strong. Solid. Like something I could finally stand on. At Vanderbilt, I led Luke through the sterile halls to Daniel's room. Daniel was propped up by pillows, pale but awake. His eyes lit up when he saw me, then shifted to Luke, and froze. Confusion clouded his face. He stared at Luke the way a man stares at a mirror he never expected to see. His lips parted, but no words came. Luke stepped closer, voice thick with emotion. I think I'm your brother. Daniel blinked, and in an instant his eyes filled with tears. My brother? His voice cracked. I watched as two men, strangers yesterday, bound by blood today, locked eyes with something unspoken, something only they could feel. Daniel reached out a trembling hand. Luke grasped it firmly. We'll talk later, Luke said softly. But right now, I'm here to save your life. The next hours moved in a blur. The doctors fast-tracked Luke's testing because Daniel's condition was deteriorating quickly. We sat in the waiting room, nerves rattling, until the hematologist entered with a smile so gentle I nearly collapsed in relief.
He's a strong match, she said.
One of the best we've seen in a long time. My hands flew to my mouth. Tears spilled over as I turned to Luke. Did you hear that? You're a match. You can save him. Luke swallowed hard, his expression a storm of shock and determination. Then he nodded. Let's do it. When do we start? That night, Daniel and Luke finally sat together, side by side. I lingered outside the doorway, listening. Their voices were low, tentative at first. Then, as minutes passed, warmer. I used to dream about having a brother, Daniel admitted, his voice breaking. I thought it was stupid, like dreaming about a house you'll never live in. But here you are. Real. Luke chuckled, though his voice shook. Guess life had other plans, huh?
I'm sorry, Danny.
Sorry I wasn't there. I didn't even know. Daniel squeezed his hand with surprising strength. You don't have to be sorry. You're here now. That's all that matters. When I finally stepped inside, Daniel's eyes met mine, glassy with tears. I have a brother, Em. I'm not alone. I kissed his forehead, whispering back, You never were. The transplant was scheduled for the next morning. I barely slept, turning over every possible outcome in my mind. Luke stayed calm, even joking with the nurses as they prepped him. Never thought I'd be giving my bone marrow to a guy I met yesterday, he teased, then looked at Daniel and added softly, But I'm glad it's him. The hours crawled. And then it was over. The transplant went smoothly. Daniel was moved into recovery while the new stem cells began their work. I sat at his bedside, holding his hand, feeling warmth return to his skin, color return to his face. Luke came in later, exhausted but smiling. Daniel reached out, his voice faint but steady. You just gave me a second chance. Luke clasped his hand. Guess we're even now. You gave me family. I couldn't stop the tears this time. For months, I had carried fear like a weight on my back. But sitting there between these two men, strangers turned brothers, I finally felt something I hadn't dared to feel in so long.
Peace.
Outside the hospital window, Nashville's skyline shimmered like a river of light against the night. The glow of it pressed against the glass, and I found myself caught between two worlds, the one I'd been drowning in for months, and this new one I hadn't dared to believe could exist. Despair had been my constant companion, but in just a few days, everything shifted. From fear to hope, from emptiness to something fuller. Life had pulled us back from the edge, offering us a gift far greater than anything I'd prayed for. For the first time in months, I inhaled without that tightness in my chest. For the first time, I let myself believe Daniel might actually live. That maybe, after everything, we weren't just surviving. We were being given a second chance. The days after the transplant unfolded like a slow sunrise. Each morning, I woke with a silent prayer and searched Daniel's face for change. A little more color, a steadier voice, a firmer grip when his hand closed around mine. Every tiny improvement felt like a miracle carved out of despair. Luke stayed close. When the hospital rules sent him out of the room at night, he stretched his tall frame across a pull-out chair in the waiting area. He never complained. One evening, I brought him coffee and found him standing at the glass window, his gaze locked on Daniel with a kind of reverence. His voice was soft, almost to himself. He's really my brother. The wonder in his words made my chest ache. Weeks passed. Daniel's strength crept back, slow but steady. One crisp autumn afternoon, he took his first steps outside the hospital. The air was sharp, carrying the faint sweetness of leaves beginning to turn. I walked beside him as he shuffled carefully down the garden path, his hand gripping mine. I forgot how good fresh air feels, he whispered, his voice breaking with both weakness and awe. A week later, the hospital discharged him. We returned to our small wooden house at the edge of Nashville, Luke following close in his pickup truck. That old house had always felt quiet, too quiet. But when we stepped back inside with him, something shifted. The walls seemed warmer, the rooms fuller. It was as if the house had been waiting, all along, for this missing piece to return. Luke became part of our lives seamlessly, like he had always been there. Evenings were spent on the porch, Daniel rocking slowly while Luke sat beside him, trading memories. Daniel shared what little he had from his foster years, and Luke filled in the gaps about their mother, the scattered siblings, the fragments of a childhood Daniel had been robbed of. One evening, Luke reached into his pocket and handed Daniel a small, weathered knife. The initials on the handle were scratched, but still visible. It's all I have left of our dad, Luke said quietly. I want you to have it. Daniel held it with trembling hands, tears falling silently as though years of loss were flowing out of him in that moment. Word had spread through Pine Hollow. Cards arrived. Prayers. Homemade casseroles. Handwritten notes from strangers telling us, family is everything. Hold each other close. It humbled me. It healed me in a way I didn't expect, to realize that people who didn't even know us cared enough to reach out. Proof that goodness still existed, even in the darkest seasons. Months passed. Daniel's hair grew thick again. His laughter returned, rough at first, then easy, like music finding its way back into the world. Slowly, he returned to his workshop. The sound of sandpaper against wood, the smell of varnish, it all came back. He moved slower now, but that spark, that light in him, was still alive. One evening, he pulled me outside to the porch. A brand new rocking chair waited there, its surface smooth, crafted with patience. He looked at me, eyes shining. For you. I sat down, the wood creaking softly beneath me, and tears blurred my vision. That chair wasn't just furniture. It was proof. Proof that he was still here, still creating, still giving. Sundays became our tradition. The three of us gathered around the table, sharing meals, laughter, and quiet gratitude. Sometimes I'd catch Daniel and Luke glancing at each other, those half-smiles lingering like they were still marveling that fate had brought them together. One golden evening, as the light slanted low through the trees, Daniel and I walked hand in hand along a leaf-strewn road near Pine Hollow. The air smelled of earth and smoke, and ahead of us, Luke laughed with a little girl riding high on his shoulders, his best friend's daughter, who had quickly claimed him as Uncle Luke. Daniel squeezed my hand. His voice was soft, reverent. I used to think being an orphan meant I'd always be alone. But I was wrong. I have you, and now I have him too. I looked at him, my throat tight. Family isn't always about blood, I whispered. But sometimes it is. And when it is, it's beautiful. That night, we sat around a small bonfire in Luke's yard. The firelight painted our faces gold. Sparks floated into the dark sky like tiny prayers. Daniel leaned into me, his hand warm in mine. Luke's voice carried through the night as he told stories about their childhood neighborhood. I listened, heart steady for the first time in years. And I thought, this is it. This is what healing feels like. Our story began in despair, but it didn't end there. It ended in family, in second chances, in finding what was lost. As the fire crackled and Daniel's shoulder pressed against mine, I realized something I'll never forget. Sometimes life breaks you down to the very edge. But just when you're about to lose hope, it gives you exactly what you need.